Chapter 1032. The sky was blue as if it had been washed. However, when Tu Xiu looked over, a black hole had appeared in the sky. It was as deep as an abyss, unfathomable. The black hole floated there silently, yet a wisp of coldness couldn't help but arise in Tu Xiu's heart, and he felt a practically suffocating pressure. What is this? Tu Xiu widened his eyes and tried his best to sense it. In an instant, his spirit felt as though it had fallen into an endless abyss. It was empty and powerless. His entire body stiffened, his chest felt stuffy, and his face gradually turned pale. His entire person was like a puppet that had lost its soul. In the end, his clothes were drenched in cold sweat, and his breathing was hurried. His mind felt like it was about to be swallowed by the aura of the black hole, and he felt extreme pressure and despair. Ah! Suddenly, Tu Xiu let out a loud cry. His soul convulsed, and his expression was one of extreme pain. Isn't that the true disciple of the Heavenly Sword sect, Tu Xiu? What's wrong with him? Could it be that I've gone berserk? A wave of discussion sounded out by his ears like the buzzing of flies, and it caused Tu Xiu to feel an indescribable feeling of irritation. After that, he was suddenly stunned, and his originally empty and scattered gaze focused once more. He looked around. He saw some cultivators looking at him in bewilderment, as if they were staring at a monster. After that, he raised his head with great difficulty, yet he noticed to his astonishment that the sky was still azure blue, and it seemed as if the black hole he saw earlier was only an illusion. How could this be? Tu Xiu's expression was ugly. Through the expressions of the others, he was very sure that only he had experienced that extremely terrifying scene earlier. This caused him to be even more horrified. What exactly happened earlier? Tu Xiu did not know that the scene he had just seen was actually a natural phenomenon reflected by the Enlightenment Tower. Previously, Lin Sun entered the Tower of Enlightenment and saw through the mysteries on the 36 tablets of enlightenment at a glance, breaking all the records since ancient times and triggering all this. You really passed all the tests of comprehension? On the way, Xiaoqinghe couldn't help but ask. Why would I lie to you? Lin Sun said casually. He was heading towards the Tao Development Pavilion. Then why isn't there any phenomenon? Xiaoqinghe asked closely like a curious baby, and he seemed to be impatient to obtain an answer. It doesn't seem to matter if there's a phenomenon or not, Lin Sun said in a low voice. In fact, he also felt a little strange. He was surprised to be able to see through the mysteries of the 36 spirit tablets with a single glance. He never thought that his comprehension ability would be so strong. This was much better than the record set by Yun Qinbai back then. But after thinking about it carefully, Lin Sun felt relieved. Firstly, the strength of his soul was extremely formidable, and he'd imperceptibly raised his comprehension ability to an extremely shocking level. Secondly, since comprehension was related to talent and innate talent, then it would definitely be affected by the devouring abyss spirit vein. Finally, the most crucial point was that there was a gate to heaven in his soul, which was branded with a mysterious word, tribulation, that contained the inheritance of the 9 transformations of Tribulation Dragon, and a mysterious snow-white feather that he obtained from the heaven accessing place. All of this allowed him to not encounter any obstruction when he accepted the test in the Truth Enlightenment building. With a single glance, he was able to see through all the secrets on the 36 comprehension tablets. Thus, Lin Sun felt that the test this time was extremely boring. Of course, he wouldn't tell Xiaoqinghe about this, so as to avoid making an unusual display and being taken as a freak by Xiaoqinghe. But Lin Sun didn't know that early on in Violet Sky City, Xiaoqinghe had already taken him to be a freak and a freak. At the same time that Lin Sun headed to the Tao Development Pavilion, numerous pieces of news spread out from Violet Sky City at a shocking speed, and it quickly spread to the Heavenly Sword sect. 9 Profound Mountain. The place where the Heavenly Sword sect resided was covered in towering mountains and peaks that were coiled by immortal mist all year round, causing it to be gorgeous like a painting. The heavens and the earth here were vast, beautiful, and magnificent, and the air was enshrouded in extremely dense spirit energy. When looked down from the sky, 9 extremely lofty mountains stood towering and pierced into the clouds, and they were completely bathed in rays of light and emitted a divine and misty aura. When looked down at carefully, numerous ancient buildings were arranged in neat rows on the 9 mountains, and they were like immortal palaces and temples that were built in the heavens. They were eternal, brilliant, and existed for eternity. Merely a single glance caused one to have the feeling that one was tiny like an ant. This was Nine Profound Mountain, the location of the Heavenly Sword sect that was renowned throughout the ages and deterred the East Victory world, and it was regarded as the sacred mountain of cultivation by the people of the world. But when the news spread into the Heavenly Sword sect, the entire Nine Profound Mountain seemed to have been alarmed, and numerous figures of cultivators charged out from the dense expanse of ancient buildings. What? A young man has successively broken senior brother Yun Qingbai's records in the Sword Evaluation Pavilion, Heart Sharpening Pavilion, and Soul Refinement Pavilion? Who's he? Impossible! Even though those records were left behind by senior brother Yun Qingbai 10 years ago, they can be said to be the most dazzling records since ancient times until now. In the entire 10 years, countless peerless figures of the East Victory world have tried to break these records, yet all of them returned in failure without exception. How could it possibly be successively broken today? It's true. The entire Violet Sky City has already gone mad from the news. Amidst the discussions, emotions of shock, bewilderment, and disbelief spread amongst the outer sect, inner sect, and true disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect. The seniors of the sect, regardless of whether they were from the inner sect or the outer sect, all stopped what they were doing at this moment and paid attention to these news. Yun Qingbei, the number 1 person below the King realm, the pride of the entire Heavenly Sword sect, and he could be said to be unparalleled since ancient times. Since Yun Qingbei entered the Heavenly Sword sect, he'd blossomed with a brilliance that could stun the ages, and he'd suppressed those of the same cultivation realm to the point they couldn't even raise their heads. After all, the Heavenly Sword sect was a first-rate ancient orthodoxy of the East Victory world, and there were many peerless figures in the sect, and those with extraordinary talent were as numerous as the hairs on an ox. But up until now, no one had been able to shake Yun Qingbai's position. He was too outstanding, too dazzling, almost perfect, and invincible. Cultivating with him would even cause others to feel despair. But now, the records that he'd personally created 10 years ago were being broken one by one, and this seemed to be too difficult for others to accept. Impossible. This must be fake. I must go and see it with my own eyes. Some disciples that worshipped Yun Qingbei extremely were unable to accept this, and they immediately rode their swords and whistled through the sky. If this is true, then who's that young man? When did such a formidable figure appear in the East Victory world? Come, let's go take a look. The entire Heavenly Sword sect fell into a state of shock. To other cultivators, perhaps they would only feel shocked and surprised that Yun Qingbai's record had been broken. But to the disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect, the significance of this was too extraordinary, and it was very likely that it would cast a shadow over the halo that enveloped Yun Qingbei. Simply speaking, Yun Qingbei was like the undefeated legend of the Heavenly Sword sect, so how could they tolerate it being broken? Not long after, numerous disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect set out, and they rode their swords and whistled towards Violet Sky City. Jingzhen, stop right there. Marshall Peak, Cloudlight Hall. This was the residence of the inner court elder of the Heavenly Sword sect, Meng Qiujing. At this moment, a beautiful woman's face was cold as a cicada in winter, and she stopped a dark-clothed young man. The beautiful woman's name was Meng Rong. She had an extremely beautiful appearance and a dignified bearing. Her black hair was coiled into a bun, and she wore a purple dress, which made her look rather dignified. "Mother, I just want to see who actually broke Yun Qingbai's record," the dark-clothed young man said helplessly. If Lin Sun was here, he would definitely be able to recognize that this young man was the 9th prince, Zhao Jingzhen. Back then, Zhao Jingzhen offended Lin Sun, and his identity as a prince was directly abolished by Xiao the Great. He was then sent to the imperial tomb and became a mausoleum keeper. But later, because his mother, Meng Rong, was the daughter of Meng Qiujing, an inner court elder of the Heavenly Sword sect, Zhao Jingzhen was able to escape through this relationship. He left Xiao Empire and was taken to the Heavenly Sword sect to cultivate. In the blink of an eye, several years had passed. The current Zhao Jingzhen was full of heroic bearing, and his eyes were like lightning. He was obviously much more mature than before, and he already possessed a frightening power. "No!" Meng Rong refused resolutely and decisively. "Why?" Zhao Jingzhen frowned. Meng Rong's eyes were deep as she said, "Because you have more important things to pay attention to." "What things?" "Revenge." "Revenge?" Zhao Jingzhen was stunned. "Have you forgotten who made your identity as a prince abolished by your father in Xiao Empire? And who was it that made you almost become a gravekeeper who could never escape?" Meng Rong's face was cold. "Lin Sun. Could it be?" Zhao Jingzhen's face darkened, and deep hatred burst out of his eyes. "Yes, he has come to the ancient Desolation Realm." Meng Rong said indifferently, "However, if you want to take revenge, I'm afraid it's not that easy to do." Zhao Jingzhen sneered. "In the mortal world, with my father's support, I may not be able to do anything to him. But in the ancient Desolation Realm, killing him is no different from pinching an ant." His voice was full of disdain and conceit. When he came to the Heavenly Sword sect several years ago, he found that he was just a frog at the bottom of a well. He had never thought that the Heavenly Sword sect could have such a terrifying power and foundation. As the grandson of Meng Qiujing, his status in the Heavenly Sword sect was quite special, and he enjoyed a lot of care that ordinary descendants couldn't enjoy. Now, when he looked at Lin Sun again, he naturally despised and looked down on him. "You're wrong. He is not an ant now." Meng Rong's expression was slightly complicated. Then she took a deep breath, restrained her emotions, and said, "I have collected all kinds of information about him. If you want to know more, come with me now." "I not only want to know, but also want to take revenge." Zhao Jingzhen couldn't wait. He couldn't forget the shame that Lin Sun brought to him in those years. Although he had been cultivating in the Heavenly Sword sect these years, his life was better than before, but he always wanted to go back to the mortal world and settle accounts with Lin Sun. Now, knowing that Lin Sun appeared in Dongxing territory, how could he bear it? Tongtian Peak. This was the forbidden area of the Heavenly Sword sect. Under normal circumstances, only the headmaster and supreme elder could enter and exit this place freely. Halfway up the Tongtian Peak, there was a Qingquan divine tree that had survived since ancient times. Its branches were lush, its leaves were green, and its green glow was monstrous. Under the Qingquan divine tree, a man sat cross-legged. His long black and thick hair was loose, hanging down to his waist. His eyes were closed, and a rich pale golden Taoist light lingered around him, making his appearance vaguely visible, making it difficult to see his true appearance. However, he just sat there silently like a god, and he emanated an aura that was sufficient to look down proudly upon the world. A peacock with colorful and gorgeous wings floated over and landed in front of the Qingquan divine tree. Suddenly, it turned into a slender, beautiful woman in colorful clothes with crystal-clear skin. Her head, which was originally high, was slightly lowered. When she looked at the man sitting cross-legged in front of the tree, she couldn't help but feel a touch of awe and admiration from the bottom of her heart. Her voice was clear and pleasing to the ear as she said, "Senior Brother Yun, the sect sent news over earlier. It said, she briefly described the incident that occurred in Violet Sky City. As soon as she finished speaking, the surroundings were deathly silent, and only the rustling of the leaves and branches of the Chinquan divine tree could be heard as the mountain breeze blew over. Beneath the divine tree, the man's eyes were closed while the glow of the Taoist Tao enshrouded his entire body, causing him to seem dreamlike and illusory. He was like an old monk in meditation, and he didn't reveal the slightest reaction. The woman in colorful clothes was stunned when she saw this, and she hesitated to speak. But in the end, she restrained herself and seemed as if she was deeply afraid of disturbing his cultivation. But right when she intended to leave, a voice resounded by her ears. "It's only a small matter. I'll have to trouble junior sister Kong to tell me personally." This voice was like the Grand Tao, and it seemed to be flat, yet it carried a force that struck directly at the heart. The woman in colorful clothes swiftly turned around, and she saw that the man that sat cross-legged beneath the tree had suddenly opened his eyes. What sort of eyes are these? They were deep like a pair of large abysses, and they were tranquil like an eternal night. But when one met his gaze, it seemed as if one's soul would sink into it, and one would feel extreme terror and pressure. How terrifying! The woman in colorful clothes was called Kong Ling, and she was from the five-colored peacock clan. She possessed extraordinary natural talent, and she was even one of the core disciples of the heavenly pivot divine grounds. Her reputation had resounded throughout the East Victory world since a long time ago, and she was a genius that was ranked on the absolute peak junior giant rankings. Yet now, under the gaze of this pair of black eyes, it caused her to feel extremely restrained, and her delicate figure stiffened while her mind showed signs of falling into disorder. Junior Sister Kong, a great era is about to arrive. Even though your current strength isn't ordinary, you're still lacking experience and accumulation. I obtained some comprehension today, and I've improved a step further in the sword Tao, so I'll give this sword to you. As he spoke, the man passed over a spirit sword that was clean and translucent like the veil of night. This. Kong Ling was shocked. How could she not recognize this sword? This was one of Senior Brother Yun's swords, and it was called Nightflower. It had accompanied Senior Brother Yun in battle for many years, and it had slaughtered countless formidable enemies. Take it. To the current me, this sword is a burden. The man's voice was calm, and it carried an inviolable tone. Thank you, Senior Brother. Kong Ling received this sword respectfully and put it away carefully, yet her heart burned with desire. This was an extremely extraordinary and extremely legendary King Tao weapon. Before she left, Kong Ling couldn't help but ask, "Senior Brother Yun, do you really not mind?" The man's eyes were black like an abyss, and he had an indifferent expression as he said, "During these years that I, Yun Qinbai, have been in closed-door cultivation, the only thing I've cared about is the opportunity to become a king during a great era. It's the strength to suppress the ages and reign supreme over the universe. Besides this, there's nothing else in this world that can make me pay attention to it." Chapter 1033. Kong Ling took the Night Glory sword and respectfully left the omniscient peak. After not seeing you for almost 10 years, Senior Brother Yun has become even more terrifying. Kong Ling's mind drifted, and she was still unable to forget the scene of her meeting Yun Qingbai's gaze earlier. Up until now, a trace of palpitation that she couldn't get rid of still lingered around her heart. 10 years ago, she was just a true disciple of the Heavenly Sword sect. At that time, Yun Qinbai had already killed over 100 half-step King Realm cultivators in the ancient Desolation Realm. He had shocked the world and was regarded as the strongest cultivator below the King Realm. At that time, Yun Qinbai was enough to make anyone look up to him. He was like an insurmountable divine mountain that could not be shaken. 10 years later, Kong Ling had grown to become a core disciple of the Heavenly Sword sect with the special talent of the five-colored peacock race. Her name had shaken the entire East Victory domain. Now, she was even ranked among the ranks of the little giants. Kong Ling originally thought that she could shorten the distance between her and Yun Qingbai. However, what she saw today caused her to be completely sober. Perhaps she had become stronger in these 10 years, but senior brother Yun was similarly no longer the senior brother Yun of 10 years ago. Merely his gaze is able to make me feel fearful and uneasy. If he were to attack me, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to resist at all. Kong Ling sighed in her heart. Being in the same cultivation realm as Yun Qingbai was undoubtedly unfortunate. Under his radiance, no matter how stunning and dazzling his peers were, they would probably be overshadowed. Just like a grain of rice, how could it compete with the sun and the moon? Although senior brother Yun hasn't made any breakthroughs in his closed-door cultivation, his accumulation over the years has undoubtedly given him a solid foundation that can make him look down upon all the geniuses of the past and present. When the great era comes and senior brother Yun breaks out of his closed-door cultivation, the entire ancient desolation realm will tremble, right? Kong Ling sighed in her heart. After that, she restrained her thoughts while her clear eyes were translucent and clear like diamonds, and they were suffused with a gorgeous expression. Even though senior brother Yun doesn't mind that his record from 10 years ago has been broken, I really want to see who exactly did this. Kong Ling was well aware of the wonders of the 12th floor. She also knew how difficult and remote it was to break Yun Qingbai's record. But now everything had changed. This caused Kong Ling to feel as if she'd seen a legend she admired being destroyed, and she was utterly unable to accept it. Whoosh! Before long, she transformed into a peacock with gorgeous and dazzling wings and soared into the sky. She left the Heavenly Sword sect and flew towards Purple Sky City. Azure Ray City, Dao Development Pavilion. Overgrown with weeds and mottled moss. This was one of the 12 floors, but it was actually a desolate scene. Lin Sun was stunned. How could this be? Xiao Qinghe sighed with emotion. It's very normal. Ever since this pavilion was occupied by Yun Qingbai's record 10 years ago, it gradually became deserted. According to what he said, only one that was capable of breaking the highest record in the Dao Development Conference would have the opportunity to obtain the fortune hidden within this pavilion. 10 years ago, Yun Qingbai stepped foot into the Dao Development Pavilion and ascended to the top in one go. The record he created was so high that it could absolutely be said to be rare since the ancient times, and it caused all those who came after him to return empty-handed. Coupled with the fact that one had to pay an entire 50,000 high-grade spiritual marrow to enter the Dao Development Pavilion, it caused most cultivators in the world to stop at the sight of it. To cultivators below the king realm in the world, the record Yun Qingbai created in the Dao Development Pavilion is like an unshakable mountain. Coupled with the fact that one has to pay an enormous amount of spiritual marrow to ascend the pavilion, who would be willing to challenge it? Xiao Qinghe had a complicated expression. The more deserted and desolate the Dao Development Pavilion was, the more it showed how extraordinary Yun Qingbai was 10 years ago. He oppressed cultivators to the point they didn't dare challenge him, and he could be said to be mighty like the sun that illuminated the sky. 50,000 high-grade spiritual marrow. The corners of Lin Sun's mouth twitched imperceptibly. Merely ascending the pavilion required such an enormous amount of spiritual marrow. Not to mention ordinary reincarnation evolution realm experts, even the inheritors of ancient orthodoxies would probably feel it strenuous and painful. Of course, the benefits would be great if one's able to break Yun Qingbai's record. According to rumor, there are 9 types of Grand Dao meditation cushions of different grades at the top of the Dao Development Pavilion. Every single Grand Dao meditation cushion is more or less capable of improving a cultivator's cultivation in the Grand Dao. Xiao Qinghe's eyes carried a strange expression. In the past, black, white, yellow, crimson, and various other different Grand Dao meditation cushions had appeared in the Dao Development Pavilion. 10 years ago, when Yun Qingbai ascended the pavilion, a violet-colored meditation cushion appeared. According to my judgment, This violet-colored meditation cushion is of the highest quality, and meditating on it is capable of allowing a cultivator's energy of the Grand Tao to undergo a qualitative transformation. Lin Sun had found out about this as well, but he only had a rough idea. Now, when he heard Xiaoqinghe's words, it caused his heart to shake fiercely, causing his cultivation in the Grand Tao to undergo a transformation. This was indeed a temptation that no cultivator was able to refuse. The Grand Tao was difficult, and cultivating was even more difficult. Especially comprehending the energy of the Grand Tao, it was even more difficult. With Lin Sun's comprehension ability and resources, he'd only attained the Tao Truth Realm in the first-grade Grand Taos of water and fire. As for his grasp of the star obliteration heaven-devouring Tao, he'd only just arrived at the Tao Aura Realm, and he was still quite a distance away from the Tao Insight Realm, let alone the Tao Truth Realm. On the other hand, the fortuitous encounter contained within the Tao Development Pavilion was capable of allowing a cultivator's cultivation in the Grand Tao to undergo a transformation, and this naturally seemed to be extremely unbelievable. Of course, the precondition to obtaining this fortuitous encounter was to first break the record Yun Qingbai had created here 10 years ago. Swish! Lin Sun flicked his sleeve. High-grade spirit essence surged like tidewater into the mouth of a Pishio statue before the entrance of the Tao Development Pavilion. You really intend to enter? Xiaoqinghe was sighing with emotion when he suddenly saw Lin Sun's actions, and he was instantly shocked. I'm not a tourist that's come to admire a historical site. Lin Sun didn't even turn around before his figure flashed and charged into the Tao Development Pavilion. This fellow is either a madman or a pervert. Xiaoqinghe was flabbergasted, and he slightly suspected if Lin Sun had enmity with Yun Qingbai. When other cultivators heard of Yun Qingbai's records and deeds, they would more or less feel pressured and hesitate, but this fellow was different. Every single time, he did it so decisively and without the slightest consideration. It seemed as if to him, defeating Yun Qingbai's record was something that he ought to do as a matter of course. Violet color already represents the highest quality Grand Tao meditation cushion. I'm afraid it's extremely difficult for you to break this record. In next to no time, Xiaoqinghe frowned. It wasn't that he didn't look favorably upon Lin Sun, but he was very clearly aware that the highest record in the Tao Development Pavilion since ancient times had already been taken away by Yun Qingbai, and it was practically impossible for Lin Sun to break it, unless a miracle occurred. After he walked into the Tao Development Pavilion, Lin Sun noticed that a mottled and ancient platform appeared before his eyes, and there was a stone staircase that ascended step by step. The staircase had 9 steps, and it was extremely ordinary. When he raised his eyes and looked over, there was only a platform that covered an area of a few meters above the platform, and it was completely empty and without a single thing. But when Lin Sun stepped foot onto the first step, the scene before his eyes changed abruptly. An expanse of darkness enveloped him. It was pitch black to the point he couldn't see his own fingers, and he couldn't sense any aura with his 6 senses. It was silent to the point it was oppressive. Standing within it was even more terrifying than being blind, because even one's senses were unable to capture any scenes besides the darkness. The Tao development begins. An ethereal voice resounded. Lin Sun took a deep breath and went silent for a short moment before he stretched out his right palm, and a crystalline and translucent drop of water suddenly floated up into appearance on the tip of his finger. After that, the drop of water trembled lightly before suddenly exploding into strands of water that were fine like the hair of an ox, and they were misty like mist. After that, the strands of water transformed into clear water, a stream, a lake, a river under Lin Sun's command, rumble. In the darkness, waves rumbled and surged as a vast ocean appeared, and it revealed a majestic, imposing aura of a myriad of rivers flowing into the sea and returning to its source. In the sky, a rainstorm poured down and drowned the sky. In an instant, this dark and desolate space became a world of water. It was as big as the ocean and as small as the dew, and all of them deduced the different wonderful forms of water. However, as Lin Sun waved his sleeve, a wisp of flame appeared. At first, it was as small as a lamp bean, and then it turned into a torch that burned fiercely, and then it turned into a river of lava and a surging sea of fire. Until the end, the flames burned the heaven and the earth, dispelled the darkness, and gave people a feeling of boundless brilliance. Rumble, the two worlds of water and fire represented the two forces of truth that Lin Sun had mastered, and they were deduced at this moment. The former was majestic and boundless, and the latter was unrestrained and boundless brilliance, showing a magnificent scene that shocked the hearts of the people. Boom! However, it wasn't over yet. As Lin Sun deduced the power of star obliteration and devouring way without holding back, it seemed as if a great abyss had appeared between the heaven and the earth, and it swallowed the heavens above and the earth below. All the scenes began to distort, shake, and collapse until they were annihilated and turned into nothingness. The two worlds of water and fire were similarly affected, and they were controlled and dominated by the terrifying force that engulfed and annihilated them. In an instant, a violent whirlpool and black hole were set off in the vast ocean, and the roaring lava turned into a flaming storm that swept through the world in a trance. There was actually a terrifying scene of the end of the world and the collapse of all Tao. Boom! After an unknown period of time, as Lin Sun finished deducing his own cultivation, the shocking scenes in front of him vanished. Then, the scene in front of him changed. When he saw the scene in front of him clearly, Lin Sun suddenly found that he had actually come to the ancient modeled Taoist altar. Did he succeed? Lin Sun was a little uncertain. At this moment, along with a strange buzzing sound, 9 futons appeared one after another on the empty Taoist altar. Some were red as if they were burning. Some were snow-white like ice. Some were green like jade. Lin Sun glanced at them one by one, and finally his gaze fell on the 9th futon. This futon was magnificent and sacred in purple, and it seemed to be extraordinary. In contrast, although the other 8 futons had their own wonders, their light was completely overshadowed by the purple futon. Lin Sun's expression suddenly became strange. Chapter 1034. Why did they all appear at once? This was the reason why Lin Sun looked strange. According to his knowledge, all the cultivators that entered the Tao Development Pavilion in the past and were able to step foot onto the Tao platform would only be able to obtain a Grand Tao meditation cushion. It was the same for Yun Qinbai. Yet now, these 9 Grand Tao meditation mats that represented different qualities and revealed different auras and colors had appeared together, and this seemed to be very unusual. Lin Sun hesitated for a moment before he gritted his teeth in the end and made a bold decision to sit on all 9 meditation cushions. Without any delay, he sat down cross-legged on the futon that was emanating a sacred purple aura. Instantly, a wondrous aura of the Grand Tao surged into his heart, and then it filled his entire body. Lin Sun was shocked. In an instant, he felt like he was in a vast starry sky and saw a figure running wildly. His hair was messy, his face haggard, and his figure was thin. Every step he took caused the surroundings to rumble and the stars to shake. His aura was too supreme and terrifying. He viewed the starry river as his path. Even though time flowed on and all things changed, he was still running madly. In the boundless starry sky, space and time were unable to obstruct his footstep. He seemed to be searching for something, yet also seemed to be carrying out a game. Every single moment was like he was facing a great enemy, and he seemed to have gone mad. Lin Sun had seen the same scene when he comprehended the star obliteration devouring way at the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival. However, unlike the last time, he felt as if he was there this time, and he'd personally witnessed the old man's expedition and search all along the way. Gradually, Lin Sun's consciousness was filled with mixed and messy insight. In his eyes, the old man seemed to have transformed into a large abyss that swept through the depths of the starry sky. Everywhere it passed, countless stars exploded into pieces before being obliterated and devoured. The Tao is like an abyss, vast and boundless, empty and immeasurable. It engulfs the stars in the void, swallows everything and melts itself. Lin Sun's chest was hot, and the spiritual vein was steaming with holy light, vaguely turning into a big abyss. The sound of sages chanting scriptures seemed to be sounding out from beneath the abyss, and it was like the illusory sound of the Grand Tao. Lin Sun could clearly feel that his mastery of the devouring star way was improving at an astonishing speed, becoming more and more profound and comprehending. But in merely a short moment, this comprehension stopped abruptly. Lin Sun opened his eyes and wished to continue. It was undoubtedly annoying to be interrupted in this way. After that, he noticed the reason. The violet-colored meditation cushion he sat on had suddenly lost all color, and it had become gray, dim, and lusterless. It didn't possess even a trace of spirit any longer. Consuming a Grand Tao meditation cushion of the highest grade actually allowed me to comprehend the star obliteration devouring sky Tao to around 70% of the Tao aura stage. How long has it only been? Lin Sun was shocked. He was very clearly aware how difficult and profound the star obliteration heaven-devouring Tao was, and the profundities contained within it could be described as vast like an ocean. Earlier, he'd racked his brains and experienced a great deal of tempering before finally attaining the Tao aura realm, and he could be considered to have grasped the rudiments of it. But now, after meditating on the purple cattail hassock for a while, he was only 30% away from attaining perfection in the Taoist aura. This rate of improvement was undoubtedly very shocking. I don't know what the magical effect of this golden futon is. Lin Sun got up and sat cross-legged on the golden futon next to him without hesitation. Instantly, the familiar atmosphere of the Tao enveloped his entire body once more. After a moment, Lin Sun opened his eyes, and his entire body surged with an obscure aura of the Tao that caused one's heart to palpitate. The perfection of the Tao aura stage. Lin Sun felt the changes in his body and forcefully restrained the joy in his heart. Without wasting any time, he once again sat on the silver cattail hassock next to him. Not long after, breakthrough, the Tao aura stage. When the silver cattail hassock lost all its spirit, Lin Sun fully realized that his grasp of the star obliteration devouring sky Tao had undergone a qualitative transformation, and he'd stepped into the Tao aura stage from the Tao aura stage in one go. Moreover, he'd only spent a quarter of an hour from beginning to end. If Shaoqinghe saw this scene, his jaw would surely drop to the ground. He wouldn't think that Lin Sun's cultivation had improved too quickly, but he would think that it was too slow. Because in the past, any cultivator that was able to arrive at the Tao platform was able to improve a Tao they'd mastered by a level by merely relying on a Grand Tao meditation cushion. Moreover, the higher the quality of the meditation cushion one sat on, the more shocking the improvement would be. But after Lin Sun consumed the violet cattail hassock of the highest quality and the other two that could be said to be of high quality, he actually only improved the star obliteration devouring sky Tao by a level. Comparatively speaking, it seemed to be very unusual. However, this could also prove how difficult and profound the star obliteration devouring sky Tao was. As the most mysterious and formidable Tao since ancient times until now, it was as ethereal as a legend, and there were too few cultivators that were able to master it. In the following time, Lin Sun was immersed in the profound comprehension of the Tao. Every time a Grand Tao meditation cushion consumed all its spirit, he would move and sit on the next meditation cushion without any delay. During this process, Lin Sun clearly felt that his grasp of the star obliteration devouring sky Tao was obviously improving in the Tao aura stage. However, he also realized that compared to the violet cattail hassock, the strength of the other Grand Tao meditation cushions showed a decreasing trend. This was normal. The 9 Grand Tao meditation cushions on the Tao platform were divided according to their quality, and the higher the quality, the greater the assistance to one's comprehension of the Tao. Conversely, the assistance would be smaller. On the other hand, because Lin Sun was worried that a mishap would occur earlier, he'd started comprehending from the grand Tao meditation cushion of the highest quality. So in the following period of time, even though the improvement of his cultivation in the Tao was obvious, comparatively speaking, it had already become much slower. But even then, it could still be said to be shocking. According to Lin Sun's judgment, merely this experience of comprehending the Tao had at least saved him around 5 years of time. In a sense, saving 5 years meant that he'd accumulated more foundation in comprehending the Tao than his peers. This effect wasn't just shocking, it could simply be said to be world-shocking. After all, in the entire ancient Desolation region, there were many geniuses that had stepped foot onto the peak like Lin Sun, and there was even no lack of peerless geniuses and natural saints. Being able to save so much time in comprehending the Tao in the same realm would absolutely allow Lin Sun to occupy a great advantage in the future battles of the world. Why hasn't he come out yet? Outside the Tao Development Pavilion, Xiao Qinghe frowned slightly. Earlier, when he challenged the Sword Trial Pavilion, Heart Sharpening Pavilion, Soul Refining Pavilion, and Enlightenment Pavilion, Lin Sun's speed of breaking records was simply like a gust of wind, and it was unbelievably swift. But this time, an entire 30 minutes had passed, yet there was still no movement from Lin Sun, and this caused Xiao Qinghe to be unable to help but arouse a bad premonition in his heart. This abnormal fellow wouldn't have really hit a wall this time, right? If it's really like this, then these 50,000 high-grade spiritual essence of his would be equivalent to throwing it away in vain. Most importantly, he can only stop here before Yun Qingbai's record. Xiao Qinghe muttered in his heart. Come to think of it, when Yun Qingbei ascended the Tao Development Pavilion all those years ago, he obtained the Violet Grand Tao Meditation Cushion of the highest quality. Such a record could already be said to be the highest, so how could it be broken? This is good as well. At least it proves that this abnormal fellow isn't ridiculously strong in all aspects. Otherwise, it would definitely be a huge blow to others. Xiao Qinghe instantly felt much more relaxed when he thought like this. Earlier, when he witnessed Lin Sun's numerous feats that could be said to be abnormal, it caused an extremely proud and peerless figure like Xiao Qinghe to suffer a blow. Now, he had a premonition that it was very likely that Lin Sun would suffer a loss. This made him breathe a sigh of relief. He had even thought about how to appease and comfort Lin Sun when Lin Sun returned without accomplishing anything. Perhaps he could even win Lin Sun's favor so that Lin Sun would take the initiative to tell him something he wanted to know, such as identity, origin, and so on. While Xiao Qinghe was thinking, he suddenly noticed that there was a sound of breaking through the air like a tide in the distant void. When he raised his eyes to look over, he saw numerous peerlessly gorgeous sword lights flying through the sky, and they were like divine rays that covered the heavens and the earth as they flashed over. One by one, the successors of the Heavenly Sword sect, clad in dark green robes, stepped on the sword light. There were men and women, old and young, and all of them were elegant and extraordinary. In the eyes of ordinary mortals, they were like a group of celestial sword immortals. Damn it, trouble finally comes. Xiao Qinghe cursed in his heart. As early as in the Purple Sky City, he had guessed that Lin Sun's feat would inevitably cause a great disturbance, but he didn't expect that trouble would come so soon. White Jade Capital was the territory of the Heavenly Sword sect. Lin Sun had successively broken the records created by Yun Qingbei, and this was bound to cause an intense reaction from the Heavenly Sword sect. The scene before his eyes undoubtedly proved this. For a time, Xiao Qinghe's expression changed indeterminately, and he had the impulse to withdraw. Even though he was proud and conceited and had someone to rely on, he didn't want to be swept into this storm. Moreover, he was sure that with the disposition of these disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect that were like swords and possessed fierce and murderous characters, a conflict would surely arise once they saw Lin Sun. But in the end, Xiaoqinghe restrained himself and didn't leave. On one hand, he was extremely curious about Lin Sun's identity and origin. On the other hand, after he witnessed Lin Sun's various shocking performances, he didn't want to miss this opportunity to build a relationship with Lin Sun. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Numerous sword lights whistled over and swiftly descended before the Dao Development Pavilion. There were at least 100 figures flickering about. In an instant, the desolate area before the Dao Development Pavilion had become much more bustling. This kid left the Enlightenment Pavilion 30 minutes ago. If nothing unexpected happens, he ought to be in the Dao Development Pavilion now. Someone spoke in a low voice. This kid is really arrogant. He thinks he can continue flaunting his might in the Dao Development Pavilion just because he broke some records created by senior brother Yunqing Bai all those years ago? Someone was extremely disgruntled and had furious expressions. Let me see exactly who this kid is. Someone spoke with a strand of hostility. Junior brothers and junior sisters, calm your rage. Don't act impulsively before we figure out this kid's origins, so as to avoid being laughed at by the other fellow Taoists for being intolerant of others. In the end, a thin man in the lead with hair that was black like ink and eyes that were cold like swords spoke in a low voice, and he suppressed the clamorous discussion in the surroundings. Chapter 1035. The disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect arrived in a threatening manner, and they didn't conceal their hostility in the slightest. Yunqing Bai was the pride of the entire Heavenly Sword sect, and he was the object of admiration for countless young disciples. In their hearts, Yunqing Bai was like a legendary figure that couldn't be disrespected or slandered. Now, the records of Yunqing Bai in the 12 levels were being broken one by one, so how could these people of the Heavenly Sword sect sit still? What are you looking at? Xiaoqinghe instantly grunted coldly when he noticed the cold and thin man's gaze, and his words were blunt and domineering. Even though he wasn't willing to cause trouble, it didn't mean that he was afraid of these fellows from the Heavenly Sword sect. The cold man was stunned, and his eyes narrowed as he sized up Xiaoqinghe before he said, "I'm Hua Yunjin, may I know who you are?" Hua Yunjin, one of the core disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect. The Heavenly Sword sect had 13 swords, and they respectively represented 13 core disciples that had stepped foot into the peak. Hua Yunjin was the Soulslayer that was ranked at the 9th position. It wasn't just in the White Jade capital, even in the entire East Victory region, the Heavenly Sword sect's 13 swords were renowned and peerlessly dazzling. When he found out that the cold and thin man was the Soulslayer Hua Yunjin, Xiaoqinghe withdrew his contempt and said, "Sun Moon Halls, Xiaoqinghe." As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings instantly became restless. Earlier, when these disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect arrived here, they'd practically directly disregarded and overlooked Xiaoqinghe's existence. Only when Xiaoqinghe berated Hua Yunjin did it draw their attention, and they were extremely displeased by Xiaoqinghe's overbearing attitude. But now, when they found out about Xiaoqinghe's identity, they finally realized who this fellow before them was. The Sun Moon Hall was an extremely ancient sect, and in terms of resources and reserves, it was absolutely not inferior to the Heavenly Sword sect. The Heavenly Sword sect had the 13 swords that were renowned throughout the world, whereas the Sun Moon Hall similarly had 16 blazing suns that possessed supreme combat strength that were renowned far and wide. Xiaoqinghe was a peerless figure that was ranked at the 7th blazing sun. The scene was slightly silent. No one had expected that a blazing sun of Sun Moon Hall would appear in the White Jade capital and appear before the Dao Development Pavilion. In particular, Hua Yunjin's eyes flashed with a chilling light. He said, "Are the successors of your Sun Moon Divine Hall the ones breaking the records of the 12 floors?" The expressions of the others were also uncertain. If it really was like that, then the significance of this would be different, and it was very likely to cause a conflict between the younger generation of these two great sects. "Is there a need for me to tell you about this?" Xiaoqinghe's expression was cold and arrogant, yet he sighed in his heart. It would be great if that freak was the successor of their Sun Moon Hall. The space between Hua Yunjin's brows carried a wisp of coldness instead. It's fine if you don't tell me. We'll naturally seek guidance from that young man when he leaves the Tao Development Pavilion later. He emphasized the word seek advice. Xiao Qinghe's pupils constricted slightly. He suddenly sneered and said, although the 12 floors are located in the White Jade capital, they are not owned by your Heavenly Sword sect. Why? You allow Yun Qi Bai to set a record here, but you don't allow others to break his record? This is too domineering. He used a disdainful and ridiculing tone to mention Yun Qi Bai, and it caused the expressions of Hua Yunjin and the others to sink while the gazes they shot at Xiao Qinghe became much colder. We just want to understand the identity of that young man. You are too agitated. Hua Yunjin's voice was cold. That isn't necessarily the case, right? Up until now, that fellow has already broken 4 of Yun Qingbai's records. Can all of you really refrain from making a move? Xiao Qinghe sneered. That will depend on whether that friend cooperates or not. Hua Yunjin's face was expressionless. Xiao Qinghe's heart sank as he realized that it would probably be very difficult to resolve the situation today. If that freak's origins were sufficiently formidable, then perhaps he would be able to make Hua Yunjin and the others feel slightly fearful. But if it was really as that freak had said, and he was a cultivator that didn't belong to any sect or sect, then it would truly be troublesome. The atmosphere was deathly silent and oppressive, and a storm was approaching. Before the desolate and cold Tao Development Pavilion, all the disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect had murderous auras, and merely the auras they emanated caused this expanse of the heavens and the earth to fall into an oppressive atmosphere. In the distance, numerous cultivators had been drawn over by this. After all, Hua Yunjin's group had torn through the sky and arrived here earlier, and the sword lights they controlled were dense like the rain. It had drawn the attention of the entire Azure Ray City since a long time ago. But these cultivators that were drawn over only dared to stand a few kilometers away and didn't dare approach. Xiao Qinghe, no matter what relationship you have with that young man, I advise you to leave as soon as possible and not interfere in this matter. Amidst this expanse of silence, Hua Yunjin spoke abruptly, and his eyes were like a pair of sharp swords that revealed an oppressive edge as they coldly locked onto Xiao Qinghe. Ha ha! Xiao Qinghe started laughing, yet his laughter was extremely icy cold. Do I, Xiao Qinghe, need your guidance on what I, Xiao Qinghe, want to do? Refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. Looks like this disciple of Sun Moon Divine Hall is determined to go against us. I have reason to suspect that it's very likely that he's in the same group as that young man. He's probably harboring malicious intent and possesses an unspeakable secret after entering the White Jade capital this time. The expressions of those disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect were overbearing. This was the White Jade capital, their territory. So what if he was a disciple of Sun Moon Divine Hall? He had to lower his head here as well. This is how your Heavenly Sword sect does things? It really is overbearing and arrogant enough. Come. Let me see what all of you can do to me. Xiao Qinghe laughed out of extreme rage. His clothes fluttered, and a shapeless imposing aura spread out and disturbed the wind and clouds. The expressions of Hua Yunjin and the others were icy cold. They were sword cultivators, and they emphasized on having a disposition like a sword and killing decisively. Being provoked like this caused them to be extremely infuriated. Since it's like this, why don't I experience the strength of the 7th blazing sun of Sun Moon Divine Hall? If you lose, it's best that you quickly vanish from the White Jade capital with your tail between your legs. Hua Yunjin strode out with large strides. His thin figure was like an unsheathed sword that erupted with a shocking sharpness. His dark green Taoist robe fluttered in the wind, and he was dazzling. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged while the void wailed, and it caused many people to feel suffocated. Clang! A spirit sword that was 2 feet long and completely suffused with a scarlet blood color flashed out and floated above Hua Yunjin's head, and it emitted a murderous aura that was like a bloody hell. Soul Slasher. In the distance, the hearts of the cultivators trembled. This was a murderous weapon that had been passed down since ancient times, and it had drunk the blood of countless powerhouses. Shameless boasting. Xiao Qinghe's wrist shook when he saw this, and a dark iron spear floated up into appearance. His imposing aura was like a sun that illuminated the sky, and his entire body flowed with brilliant golden divine radiance. Rumble. The battle hadn't erupted, yet the pressure emitted by both of them had already collided fiercely with each other. It was like volcanoes colliding, and it caused the space between them to shatter and rumble like glass. The nearby disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect were moved as well, and they realized that even though Xiao Qinghe was arrogant, he deserved to be ranked as the 7th blazing son of Sun Moon Divine Hall, as his imposing aura was far from something an ordinary genius could compare to. My God! One is one of the 13 swords of the Heavenly Sword sect, the other is one of the 16 blazing sons of Sun Moon Divine Hall. Both of them are actually going to fight here. This is a collision between peerless geniuses. It's rare to see in the past, and everyone will have a feast for the eyes now. The spectating cultivators in the distance grew more and more numerous, and they formed a dense mass. At this moment, all of them revealed excited expressions because an unparalleled battle was about to begin, and it caused their blood to boil. I'll advise you one last time. Leave now and we can let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, I can only send you on your way myself. Hua Yunjin's figure stood ramrod straight while his clothes fluttered with the wind, and the soul's layer above him let out a clear howl that was like a voice that yearned for blood and possessed extraordinary might. Cut the crap. If you want to fight, then stand. Xiao Qinghe grunted coldly as he pointed his spear towards Hua Yunjin from afar, and a peerlessly violent battle intent surged out like tidewater and covered the heavens and the earth. You don't know what's good for you. Hua Yunjin didn't hesitate any longer. He took a step forward while the vital energy in his body rumbled like lightning, and his fierce, killing intent charged through the layer of clouds in the sky. But before he could make a move, the scene before his eyes flashed, and then he saw a figure was already standing before Xiao Qinghe with his back facing him, causing the figure's appearance to be unable to be seen clearly. Since I've already asked you to leave, then why haven't you left? Shockingly, this person was Lin Sun. Xiao Qinghe stared his eyes wide open as he didn't notice when Lin Sun had walked out from the Dao Development Pavilion. Let's go. Lin Sun patted him on the shoulder. Hey kid, who do you think you are? Quickly fuck off and don't disturb the battle. Those disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect berated loudly. The battle was about to erupt, yet it was disrupted by the sudden appearance of a young man, and it caused them to feel exceptionally displeased. Quickly move aside. Damn it. This is a peak battle, and it's rare. Kid, do you have nothing better to do? You actually came here to disturb the battle? The distant spectators were displeased as well. They were excitedly preparing to watch the battle, yet it was interrupted like this, and they instantly pointed their spears at Lin Sun, who disturbed the battle. Unexpectedly, Xiao Qinghe seemed to be extremely obedient, and he immediately restrained the battle intent in his body before turning around and intending to leave without the slightest hesitation. Lin Sun had already come out, so how could he stupidly fight desperately with these disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect? After all, this was White Jade Capital, the territory of the Heavenly Sword sect. So even if he defeated the young, there was still the old. So even if he was able to defeat Hua Yunjin, he would be finished sooner or later. You want to leave just like this? Wishful thinking. Hua Yunjin's expression was gloomy and icy cold, and his aura was terrifying. Previously, he was ready to take action, but he was disturbed by Lin Sun, which made him feel suffocated, and the qi in his body was almost disordered. The most unforgivable thing was that Lin Sun had turned his back to him from beginning to end. Obviously, Lin Sun didn't take Hua Yunjin seriously at all. Whoosh! Without any hesitation, Hua Yunjin had already rushed out as soon as he finished his words. The scarlet soul-chopping sword swept out and evolved into a dazzling blood-red sword intent. This sword, like lightning and wind, was incomparably fierce and murderous, and filled with the strong spirit of the fierce blood way, went straight to Lin Sun's back. Looking from a distance, this sword seemed to break the gate to purgatory, which was ghastly and terrifying. "Watch out!" Xiao Qinghe was shocked. However, before he could finish his words, he saw Lin Sun casually patting him without looking back. Bang! Under the gaze of countless people, the amazing sword shattered in the void like a piece of paper. Chapter 1036. At the beginning, everyone thought that Lin Sun was an ignorant outsider. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to break into the battle that was about to break out like a rash fool. Therefore, both the successors of the heaven-reaching sword sect and the cultivators watching from afar reproached him without hesitation. But at this moment they were dumbfounded. As the seventh sword of the 13 swords, no matter how ordinary Hua Yunjin's sword was, it couldn't be resisted by ordinary cultivators. When he made his move, everyone subconsciously imagined a bloody scene. The young man was killed and didn't even know how he died. But the fact was quite different. Hua Yunjin's sword was crushed by the young man's palm casually before it could get close. His movement was so casual, as easy as dispersing a mosquito that disturbed people's dreams. But the more it was like this, the more shocking it was. Only Xiao Qinghe seemed to have expected this. But when he saw Lin Sun defuse a killing sword intent so easily, he was also a little surprised. "What are you doing? Let's go." Lin Sun glared at him and walked away first. Xiao Qinghe was a little unsatisfied. In fact, he actually wanted Lin Sun and Hua Yunjin to have a duel so that he could have a good look at how abnormal the guy he regarded as a monster was. But it was obvious that Lin Sun didn't pay attention to Hua Yunjin from beginning to end. He was in a hurry to leave. Humph! Behind him, Hua Yunjin rushed over again with a gloomy face. He was also surprised that his sword was shattered. Only now did he realize that the young man was not as simple as he thought. Originally, he planned to bear it for a while and explore the background of the young man before making a decision whether to fight. But Lin Sun didn't give him a chance at all. From beginning to end, he left as if he didn't exist. This made Hua Yunjin intolerable. Buzz! The sword hummed like a tide. The soul-chopping sword swept through the air and drew a dazzling sword intent that could dim the sky. It was as red as blood and as delicate as burning fire. Great! The successors of the heaven-reaching sword sect brightened their eyes and were stunned by the power of this sword. This sword was called Flowing Fire Blood, and it was one of the most murderous sword inheritances of the heaven-reaching sword sect. Rumor had it that it was created by a saint of the way of the sword with his blood, sweat, and tears. Once it was used, the sword intent would be like flowing fire and blood, able to turn everything into ashes. Without a doubt, Hua Yunjin was going all out. The heavens and the earth rumbled and the void collapsed. This sword intent flashed out with the momentum of a thunderbolt that shot into the 9 heavens and a scorching sun that destroyed mountains and rivers. Everyone's expression changed greatly, and they all had the misconception that they were almost suffocating. The might of a peerless figure was vividly displayed at this moment. In the distance, Lin Sun and Xiao Qinghe hurried forward. Xiao Qinghe's back stiffened when he noticed this sword strike, and he couldn't help but swiftly turn around while the vital energy in his body rumbled. This was a kind of battle instinct, a subconscious reaction after sensing the danger of this sword. Lin Sun was still moving forward. He didn't look back, as if he didn't notice it at all. Xiao Qinghe's eyes narrowed slightly. How could this freak be so arrogant? Could it be that he wants me to help him neutralize this sword? Xiao Qinghe was speechless for a while. He felt that he was about to become Lin Sun's full-time bodyguard. Previously, he helped Lin Sun confront Hua Yunjin, and now he had to worry about and protect Lin Sun's safety. It was simply, but no matter how he cursed in his heart, Xiao Qinghe didn't dare to be careless in the face of this sword strike. As a peerless figure, he knew too well how terrifying this strike of Hua Yunjin's was, so he must take it seriously. Boom! However, before Xiao Qinghe could make a move, he saw the sword intent that broke through the air explode in the middle of its journey once again. The movement was so loud that it sounded like muffled thunder. The bloody light burst out in the void, causing a terrifying mushroom cloud to rise and drown the heaven and earth within a radius of 3,000 meters. Among the cultivators who were watching from afar, many people's hearts twitched and they let out muffled groans. Some of them even trembled all over and were so shocked that they collapsed to the ground. Those successors of the heaven-reaching sword sect turned pale. How could such a powerful and blazing sword be destroyed once again? Unlike the last time, Lin Sun didn't make a move this time. The scene was too strange and unbelievable. It was as if there was an invisible hand blocking it and easily obliterating this flowing flame blood ember. Hua Yunjin's pupils suddenly shrank, and his face became unprecedentedly serious. What a powerful force of Tao! As a person in the game, he knew clearly that this strike of his was defeated by an invisible and obscure force of Tao. A peerless expert. In an instant, he looked at Lin Sun's back with a wisp of vigilance and fear. But who on earth was this person? How could he be so powerful? Why don't you move? It'll be too late if you don't leave now. Lin Sun's voice sounded in Xiao Qinghe's ears, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch fiercely. This guy was really freaking abnormal. He sighed, shook his head, and moved forward. Previously, he was ready to fight, but now it seemed that all this was superfluous. That abnormal didn't need his protection at all. Friend, don't you look down on my heaven-reaching sword sect by leaving like this? Hua Yunjin shouted. When the voice sounded, he was still in the same place. When his voice fell, he had already appeared thousands of meters away, and the soul-slaying sword in his hand roared and slashed out. Crash! It was like a blood river falling from the ninth heaven, majestic and boundless, covering the sky and the earth. The blazing sword will of Tao even produced various visions. There were scenes of white bones floating, mountains of corpses piling up, ghosts and gods crying, and the sorrowful hissing of kings. In an instant, Xiao Qinghe was shocked and cried, "This guy is crazy." He actually displayed one of the three great sword scriptures of the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Catastrophe Sword Scripture. The Catastrophe Sword Scripture was one of the three supreme sword scriptures created by the Grand Master of the Heavenly Sword Sect, and also one of the three great sword scriptures of the Heavenly Sword Sect. This sword was composed of the three disasters: natural disaster, earthly disaster, and human disaster, and the heart disaster, spirit disaster, soul disaster, yin soul disaster, yang soul disaster, and spiritual soul disaster. The three disasters and 6 disasters were obscure and profound, and they were fused into the profundity of the sword Tao. Once it was executed, it possessed unfathomable might that could destroy the heavens and the earth. Just like at this moment, what Hua Yunjin executed was the essence and profundity of the sword Tao of the Catastrophe Scripture. A single strike was like a natural disaster descending into the world, and it displayed the scene of doomsday that caused one to feel despair. All the cultivators present had the misconception that they were on the verge of collapse. Their minds shook, their hairs stood on end, and they were completely awed by the might of this strike. Even the disciples of the Heavenly Sword Sect were no exception. Why are you so flustered? Have the bearing of a disciple of the Sun Moon Hall, all right? But at the same time, Lin Sun's angry voice resounded by Xiao Qinghe's ears, and it almost drove him mad. This was the Catastrophe Sword Scripture. In the entire East Victory region, it was sufficient to be ranked within the scope of a supreme sword scripture. Who wouldn't be nervous when facing such a slaughter? Suddenly, Xiao Qinghe came to his senses. Wait, this freak's tone doesn't seem to be nervous at all. At the same time, he saw Lin Sun attack, yet he still didn't turn around and just waved his right hand behind him. His movements were casual, smooth, and otherworldly. In an instant, it was like a vortex formed from a cool breeze had flashed out. In the beginning, it was inconspicuous, yet later on, it transformed into a black hole that expanded wantonly. Rumble! Everywhere the vortex swept, the sword insight that seemed like a natural disaster descending into the world was obliterated and devoured amidst the deafening sounds of collision. When looked at from afar, even though the natural disaster blotted out the heavens and the earth, it was devoured by the energy of the black hole, and it vanished completely in the blink of an eye. Not even the slightest aftershock or trace was left behind. Xiao Qinghe almost bit his tongue, and he gasped without end. What sort of secret technique of the Grand Tao is this? How could this be possible? At the same time, Hua Yunjin's expression turned grim. This was the might of the catastrophe sword scripture, one of the supreme inheritances of the heavenly sword sect. Once it was executed, even a half-step king realm expert would be annihilated. Yet now, it had actually been easily destroyed by Chen Shi once again. This caused Hua Yunjin's scalp to go numb, and he was unable to maintain his composure. But he didn't have the time to think because the energy of the black hole that devoured the heavens and the earth had transformed into a palm print that pressed down towards him. For the first time, Hua Yunjin experienced what it meant to be an imminent calamity. This strike was too terrifying, and it revealed the might of being unstoppable and obliterating, causing him to truly feel the aura of death descend upon him. His entire body stiffened while his soul almost left his body, and he couldn't help but let out a sharp cry as he dodged in panic. He seemed to be in an extremely sorry state, and he'd lost his cold and terrifying bearing from before. But the embarrassing thing was right at the instant he'd just dodged, the black hole palm print had suddenly vanished as if it had evaporated into thin air. Instantly, Hua Yunjin's face flushed red, and his heart was filled with shame. I was obviously teasing and warning myself. If it was Yun Qingbai who executed this sword scripture, then perhaps I would be slightly fearful. As for you, you're far from possessing the qualifications to fight me, so it's best that you stop before going too far. Otherwise, the next time will be the time of your death. An indifferent voice resounded by his ears. The young man in the distance still didn't turn around. But Hua Yunjin knew that this warning was coming from him. He silently clenched his fists, and his face was green. He felt a sense of defeat that he'd never felt before. There were many times when he wanted to charge forward and fight to the death. But in the end, he controlled himself. He didn't dare to gamble with his life. The battlefield was so silent that even a pin drop could be heard. The descendants of the Heavenly Sword sect stood there in a daze. Like statues, their bodies were petrified. The spectators in the distance felt like they had just picked up their lives from the jaws of death. Their bodies were soaked in cold sweat and their hands and feet were cold. That exchange just now was far too frightening. However, compared to the sword strike that seemed like a natural disaster had descended, the energy of the black hole that swept through the world was undoubtedly even more horrifying and horrifying. Who was that young man? Hua Yunjin was one of the 13 swords and had dazzling combat abilities. How was it possible that he didn't even turn around to look at him? Without a doubt, he had completely disregarded him. In this battle, Hua Yun had suffered a crushing defeat. Whoosh. Chapter 1037. Kong Ling's arrival added a touch of color to the deathly silent atmosphere. Her skin was like ice and snow, and she was graceful like a celestial maiden. Her appearance was beautiful, and she wore a multicolored dress that caused others to feel ashamed of their inferiority. Senior sister Kong Ling. Hua Yunjin was startled, his expression uncertain. The crushing defeat just now made him feel ashamed to face Kong Ling sword. In the distance, all the cultivators were visibly moved while their gazes carried deep reverence. It was like they were looking at a celestial maiden that had descended to the world, and her bearing was lofty, pure, and inviolable. The Heavenly Sword sect had the 13 swords, and Kong Ling was ranked third. She wielded the Gu Shi sword, and was peerless in her generation. She inherited the talent of the 5-colored peacock, and could be said to be a one-in-a-million genius. In addition, she had an outstanding appearance like a goddess. Just in terms of influence, she was far more influential than soul-slaying sword Hua Yunjin. Kong Ling seemed to have something on her mind. Even though she sensed that the atmosphere was strange and subtle, she didn't pay any attention to it. As soon as she arrived, she walked directly towards the Dao Development Pavilion. She was looking for someone. She was looking for a young man who was breaking Yun Qingbai's records. Apart from that, nothing else could pique her interest. Hua Yunjin and the others were stunned when they saw her actions. Then they realized something and their expressions changed slightly. That guy just now, could he be Boom? Right at this moment, a grand fluctuation swept out from the Dao Development Pavilion, and it emanated rumbling that caused the heavens and the earth to tremble. After that, under the surprised gazes of everyone, the Pishio stone statue that was squatting before the Dao Development Pavilion had actually transformed into a strand of green smoke. Green smoke curled up, and a blurry and hazy figure was vaguely outlined in the void. After waiting for thousands of generations, my Dao is not lonely. In their days, everyone seemed to have heard a heroic and unrestrained laughter resound out. However, when he looked carefully, there was no trace of it. When he looked at the Dao Development Pavilion again, it had recovered its previous calm a long time ago, and only the stone statue of the Pishio that squatted before the door had vanished. Kong Ling stood there while her clear eyes flickered indeterminately. In the distance, Hua Yunjin and the others were stunned, and a bad premonition arose in their hearts. "Where is that person?" Kong Ling suddenly asked in a clear and clean voice. "He just left," Hua Yunjin blurted out. "Why didn't you tell me immediately?" Hua Yunjin was at a loss for words. His expression was dark and gloomy. Did he have to take the initiative to speak about how he had been defeated? This was too humiliating. Unable to accomplish anything, but more than enough to spoil things. As Kong Ling spoke, her figure flashed, and she transformed into a gorgeous and noble 5-colored peacock that charged into the sky. "I'm not good enough? I want to see if Senior Apprentice Sister Kong Ling is that fellow's match." Hua Yunjin's face was gloomy and ugly. The other successors of the Heavenly Sword sect kept quiet out of fear. At this moment, they finally dared confirm that the young man that took Xiao Qinghe away earlier was surely the target they were looking for. "As for this person, I've probably already broken the record of the Dao Development Pavilion." They instinctively looked towards the Dao Development Pavilion while feeling shocked and complicated in their hearts. "Brother, if you don't tell me who you are, I'm going to get anxious." Lin Sun and Xiao Qinghe were galloping in the void. Xiao Qinghe asked discontentedly. "Let's leave White Jade Jing first." Lin Sun answered casually. "Alright." Xiao Qinghe agreed straightforwardly. After that, his brows raised as he said, "Wait, did you break Yun Qingbai's record in the Dao Development Pavilion?" "Yes," Lin Sun replied. When he spoke of his experience in the Dao Development Pavilion, Lin Sun still felt as if he was dreaming. Because he'd utterly never imagined that merely ascending the pavilion would allow his comprehension of the star obliteration and sky devour Dao to break through to the perfection realm of the Dao concept in one go. After all, he'd gone through a great deal of effort to barely attain the initial stage of the Dao aura. On the other hand, ascending the pavilion this time had only lasted for 4 hours, yet it allowed this Dao to undergo a transformation by leaps and bounds, and it was almost equivalent to saving around 7 years of time to comprehend the Dao. In other words, if Lin Sun wanted to attain the perfection realm of the Dao insight by relying on his own resources, reserves, and comprehension ability, then it would at least require 7 years of time. Yet now, he'd accomplished it in a short period of 4 hours. Such a fortuitous encounter could be said to be shocking, and it caused Lin Sun to be unable to calm down completely for a while. There were countless fortuitous encounters in this world. Some relied on this to soar into the sky and become renowned throughout the world. Others relied on this to comprehend the Tao overnight and set foot on a higher cultivation realm. This was precisely the fundamental reason why cultivators flocked to fortuitous encounters and fortuitous encounters. Who could resist such a temptation as obtaining a strand of fortuitous encounter might change one's fate? Moreover, for Lin Sun and the other great cultivators of the younger generation who'd set foot on the peak of the reincarnation development realm, the upcoming great era was undoubtedly an unprecedented great fortuitous encounter that was hard to come by in a million years. This freak is simply inhuman. After obtaining Lin Sun's affirmative answer, Xiao Qinghe had an impulse to curse in his heart. Comparing oneself to others would indeed drive one to death. He'd witnessed Lin Sun's various shocking performances in the sword-testing pavilion, heart-sharpening pavilion, soul-refining pavilion, enlightenment pavilion, and Tao development pavilion. Even someone as proud and conceited as Xiao Qinghe felt as if he'd been beaten to the point of being badly injured. He was one of the 16 blazing sons of Sun Moon Hall, and he was a peerless figure that received the attention of all and was renowned in the world. But in front of Lin Sun, he had a feeling of being unable to raise his head. This feeling was absolutely difficult to imagine unless one experienced it personally. What pride, conceit, what foundation, and what reliance were all completely crushed. Who could bear this? Xiao Qinghe once heard that when Yun Qingbai traveled the world, the experts of the same generation as him all thought that being in the same generation as Yun Qingbai was destined to be a great misfortune. At that time, Xiao Qinghe sneered at this, but now after witnessing Lin Sun's various performances, he finally understood the taste of this great misfortune. So, you don't intend to continue challenging the levels? Suddenly, Xiao Qinghe realized a problem. No. Lin Sun shook his head. Among the 12 floors, the 5 floors he'd challenged before had different effects on his cultivation. As for the other 7 floors, 6 of them were places that could only be entered by experts of the King realm. The other body-tempering pavilion was specifically aimed at cultivators on the path of physique sanctification, and it was in conflict with his current path. In addition, the movement he'd caused had already alarmed the heaven-reaching sword sect, and he didn't want to get into trouble because of this. In one day, Lin Sun defeated the 5 floors alone, a record in both ancient and modern times. Even Yun Qingbai was slightly inferior to such a magnificent feat. Xiao Qinghe sighed with emotion. He secretly decided that when he returned to the sect, he must tell all the news about Lin Sun to senior brother Mi Hengzhen, because in his mind, Mi Hengzhen might be the only one who could compete with Lin Sun in terms of foundation, talent, and combat power. As for whether the other top practitioners of the 16 Blazing Suns could compete with Lin Sun, Xiao Qinghe had no confidence at all. At the same time, Lin Sun was also thinking. This trip to White Jing made him gain far more than it seemed on the surface. First of all, in the sword testing tower, he was completely sure that Yun Qingbai 10 years ago was destined to be no match for him. In the heart-sharpening tower, he was sure that his mental state had reached the spirit realm, far surpassing his peers in both ancient and modern times. In the soul-refining tower, his spiritual cultivation had reached the first level of divine flower in prominence. It was worth mentioning that whether it was the mental power of the spirit realm or the spiritual power of the divine flower in prominence, they could only be seen in the old monsters of the King realm. Moreover, ordinary old monsters of the King realm didn't have such power. As for the Enlightenment Tower, although he gained nothing, Lin Sun judged that at least in terms of comprehension, he didn't lose to anyone in the world. His greatest gain was definitely his experiences in the Tao Development Pavilion. The 9 futons of different quality allowed him to improve his cultivation by leaps and bounds in comprehension, and it was absolutely no less than obtaining an extremely rare opportunity. Lin Sun only paid more than 50,000 upper-grade spiritual marrows to pass the 5 floors. Although it was a huge fortune, it was very insignificant compared with the gains. Don't underestimate Yun Qinbai. This person's foundation is unfathomable. 10 years ago, he was already the first person below the king realm, and now he has been in closed-door cultivation for nearly 10 years. Xiao Qinghe spoke abruptly. Relying on his comprehension ability and natural talent, 10 years of time is sufficient for his combat strength to undergo a tremendous change. A saint of Sun Moon Palace once said that Yun Qinbai is a peerless figure who is destined to lead the trend of the great world, and it's difficult to compete with him. When he heard the last part, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. No one could ignore or underestimate the judgment of a saint. I won't underestimate him, but I won't take him too seriously either. Lin Sun was silent for a moment and said, "The great world means great changes. Everything is possible. Whether Yun Qinbai can dominate the world is also uncertain." Xiao Qinghe was stunned. He was keenly aware that there was a trace of imperceptible coldness in Lin Sun's words when he mentioned Yun Qinbai. However, before he could react, Lin Sun said with a smile, "What's more, the reincarnation development realm is the reincarnation development realm after all. Even if he accumulates for 100 years, his combat strength will be limited as long as his cultivation doesn't change. He is waiting for the great world to come, and so are countless geniuses in this world. As for me, isn't it the same?" Lin Sun smiled indifferently with a composed expression. He didn't speak in a sonorous and passionate tone, but he had a disdainful and confident spirit that couldn't be ignored. Xiao Qinghe's heart moved inexplicably, and his blood surged. He said, "You're right. We cultivators don't fight for days and nights. We only fight for the Great Way, and who can go further on the Great Way." However, at this moment, an abrupt and cold voice sounded, I don't think you can go too far now." Along with the voice, a gorgeous and blazing divine rainbow swept through the sky at an incredible speed, as if it was teleporting. In the blink of an eye, it had already closed in. When he looked over once more, the divine ray of light suddenly flashed, and it had already transformed into a beautiful woman with fair skin that was graceful like a celestial. Chapter 1038. Xiao Qinghe's expression suddenly became solemn. Although Kong Ling was a woman, she was even more terrifying than the other core disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect. This woman's temperament was prideful and noble. She was extremely talented, and she was the only person at the peak who had received guidance from Yun Qinbai. She was deeply appreciated by Yun Qinbai. None of this was important. What was important was that her temperament was most suited to the sword Tao, and she was decisive in killing. Otherwise, she wouldn't have become the 3rd most powerful person in the 13 swords. "You're the one who challenged the 12 floors today?" As soon as Kong Ling arrived, she directly disregarded Xiao Qinghe, and her clear eyes were indifferent and icy cold as they locked onto Lin Sun. Her figure was graceful, and she had skin of ice and bones of jade. She had the aura of an otherworldly immortal, but her aura was fierce to the point it aroused reverence in the hearts of others. An indescribable murderous aura began to spread across the world. Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of it and corrected him casually. "Strictly speaking, I only broke through 5 buildings. I was afraid of trouble, so I had to stop here. As long as I have a clear conscience, why should I be afraid of trouble?" Kong Ling's fine black hair was tied behind her head, and her forehead was fair and smooth. Her beautiful face was icy cold, and she had an oppressive and sharp aura. "It's impossible even if I have a clear conscience. I was almost stopped by someone as soon as I walked out of the Tao Development Pavilion. Now I just want to leave, yet you spared no effort to catch up to me. Do you think this isn't troublesome? Lin Sun asked. Kong Ling frowned. Before she could speak, Lin Sun said, Don't talk nonsense. Tell me your purpose. If you want to fight, do it now. If you want to talk nonsense, I don't have time to accompany you. These words were not polite at all. If the other cultivators of the White Jade capital saw that Fairy Kong Ling, whom they respected the most, was actually being treated so rudely, it would probably incur the wrath of the masses. Even if it was Xiao Qinghe, he couldn't help but feel extreme admiration. In the eyes of this pervert, there's probably no tenderness towards the fairer sex, and he's extremely ferocious. Kong Ling was obviously caught off guard as well, and her face was icy cold as she said, What a madman! Then I'll teach you a lesson first before questioning you. Clang! A spirit sword that was jade white like snow, 3 fingers wide, and a meter long left its sheath. In an instant, it was like a scorching sun had appeared in the sky, and it emanated dazzling and blazing divine radiance. Gu Shou Sword. It was a supreme weapon of the heavenly sword sect that had been passed down since ancient times. His sword was like the sun, and it reflected the light of the universe and separated the muddy and pure energy. It was extremely profound. It was even stronger than Hua Yunjin's soul-slaying sword. Extreme Yang Fusion. Kong Ling attacked. The grand shooting sword erupted with light that overflowed into the heavens. It was blazing like a great sun, as if it could melt the heavens. Her movements were extremely nimble and decisive. She attacked as soon as she said she would, and she vividly displayed the swift and fierce aura of a sword cultivator. Not good. This woman used the secret of the great yin-yang sword scripture right from the get-go. It's obvious that she wants to kill. Xiao Qinghe's face changed as he transmitted a message to Lin Sun. The Great Yin-Yang Sword Sutra was the second Supreme Sword Sutra created by the Heavenly Sword Ancestor. It was also one of the sect-guarding legacies of the Heavenly Sword sect alongside the Catastrophe Sword Sutra. This scripture was divided into Yin and Yang scrolls, and it had the miraculous ability to reverse the universe and circulate Yin and Yang. As the saying goes, solitary Yin can't be born, solitary Yang can't exist. Yin and Yang complemented each other, and it just happened to be like the circulation of clear and turbid, the rotation of Yin and Yang, the interaction of dragons and tigers, and it was capable of developing unbelievable might. Just like at this moment, Kong Ling's sword was like a great sun shining in the sky, which was boundlessly terrifying. Moreover, the Gusha sword in her hand was an Imperial Dao extreme weapon that was fused with the essence of extreme Yang, so it allowed the might of her strike to increase by at least 30%. Xiao Qinghe asked himself that he had to go all out to fight against this blow. Swish! Almost at the same time, Lin Sun made a stroke with his fingers and displayed the mystery of reaching for the stars. It was just a casual blow, but the bright sun sword intent was smashed in the explosion. Damn it, I forgot that this pervert can't be judged by common sense. Xiao Qinghe was a little embarrassed. When he fought with Hua Yunjin before, Lin Sun had reminded him to keep his demeanor. But now, he was surprised again. Extreme melting and burning. Kong Ling's momentum became more and more fierce when she failed to hit Lin Sun. Her whole body was covered with 5-colored light, which was gorgeous and blazing. Then, she made another earth-shattering slash. Lin Sun and Kong Ling fought fiercely high up in the sky. They fought fiercely to the point the sky and the earth turned upside down, the sun and the moon dimmed, and the sea of clouds in a radius of 5,000 kilometers was disrupted and shattered. If one looked carefully, one would notice that Kong Ling's sword chi was like a rainbow that moved horizontally and vertically, and every strike of her sword would cause a terrifying phenomenon of the heavens and the earth with a shocking momentum. This was the secret of the great yin-yang sword scripture, a supreme sword scripture. Even a half-step king realm expert was bound to be annihilated here. Comparatively speaking, Lin Sun was very calm from the beginning until the end. He pressed his fingers together as a blade and fought with Kong Ling. His figure was ethereal like a rock in the undercurrent that couldn't be shaken no matter how it was washed. In the fierce battle, Kong Ling's expression gradually became serious and solemn, and the murderous aura all over her body rose steadily, becoming more and more fierce and dazzling. She knew that she'd encountered a great enemy that was rarely seen in her lifetime. Clang! Before long, she stretched out her hand and drew out a black spiritual sword that was translucent and clean like the eternal night, and then she flashed up into the sky. Nocturnal sword. If the gunslinger sword was said to be extremely young and fierce, then the nocturnal sword was extremely keen and cold. This sword was the sword Yun Qingbai used to conquer the world all those years ago, and it had always been tempered and nurtured by him. As soon as this sword appeared, it instantly intersected with the gunslinger sword, and they seemed like two black and white dragons that coiled above the sky while emanating boundless killing intent. Even though Lin Sun didn't recognize the nocturnal sword, he acutely noticed that this sword carried an aura that was familiar to him. At the same time, Xiao Qinghe's voice transmission that carried shock resounded by his ears. "You must be careful. That's nocturnal sword of Yun Qingbai. He relied on this sword to annihilate over 100 half-step King Realm experts 10 years ago. It really is his sword." Lin Sun recalled that when he challenged the barrier on the 5th floor, he'd witnessed the aura left behind by Yun Qingbai many times, and it was exactly the same as the aura on the nocturnal sword. Bang! When he thought up to here, Lin Sun didn't hold back any longer. He suddenly took a step forward, and then a swanny seal tore through the sky and fiercely broke through Kong Ling's attack. After that, he stretched out his hand to grab it, and then he utilized the mighty restriction to seize it from afar. The nocturnal sword shook violently and almost flew out of Kong Ling's hand. Kong Ling's expression finally changed. With a flash of 5-colored divine light around her, she dissolved the power of the mighty restriction and saved the nocturnal sword that was almost taken away. However, her expression had become extremely dignified with a touch of surprise and doubt. She finally realized that Lin Sun hadn't exerted his full strength in the previous battle, but had held back. Lin Sun was also a little surprised. He didn't expect that the 5-colored divine light around Kong Ling could break his determined attack so easily. Bang! Without any delay, he attacked again. This time, he intended to kill Kong Ling along with her sword. In an instant, Lin Sun seemed to have become another person. The aura around him covered the sky and the earth, and he had a mighty momentum of supremacy in the world. As he moved forward, the brilliant green Taoist light lingered around his body, rumbling like thunder. Just that kind of power made Kong Ling's whole body stiff, her soul extremely depressed, and her heart uncontrollably filled with fear. It was too terrible. Was this his real strength? As Kong Ling guessed, Lin Sun just wanted to see the mystery and power of the great Yin-Yang sword scripture out of curiosity, so he didn't use his real strength at all. But now, when he noticed the existence of the nocturnal sword, Lin Sun finally stopped hesitating and wanted to take the sword. It was not because he was greedy for the treasure, but because there were traces of Yun Qingbai's battle on the sword. If he could get this sword, it would be enough for Lin Sun to further understand some details of Yun Qingbai. At the same time, Xiao Qinghe, who was watching the battle, also gasped. Even watching from a distance, he still felt a great pressure and his heart palpitated. Since he had seen Lin Sun's extraordinariness, he had always been very curious about how terrifying the guy he regarded as a pervert was. But now, he finally found a clue. Lin Sun rushed forward, and a big hand was condensed, covering Kong Ling with the momentum of covering the universe and locking the 8 extremes. Clang! Clang! Kong Ling chopped with the Gusha sword and the nocturnal sword, but she couldn't shake the big hand, no matter how powerful her sword intent was. Whoosh! Moreover, in the process, an irresistible devouring force emerged. The nocturnal sword seemed to be pulled by the mighty force and was suddenly taken away by Lin Sun. Oh no! Kong Ling was shocked. Danger was imminent, so she couldn't care about anything else. She suddenly bit the tip of her tongue and exerted her secret talent. 5 colored lights surged around her, and she suddenly turned into a gorgeous peacock with wings as sharp as blades. With a bang, she broke a hole in the big hand covering the sky and got out. The power of the 5-colored light is really horrible. Xiao Qinghe was completely moved. Although Kong Ling's combat power was not as good as Lin Sun's, it was not so easy to be killed with such a talent. At the same time, Lin Sun's black eyes also narrowed. He really didn't expect that the 5-colored light was so powerful and had the terrible power to destroy everything. No matter who you are, today's hatred will be avenged in the future. Kong Ling's eyes were cold with incomparable hatred. She spread her gorgeous wings and flew to the distance as if she was teleporting. Obviously, she knew that she couldn't defeat Lin Sun, so she retreated decisively. Lin Sun finally refrained from chasing her. After all, White Jade Capital was the territory of the heaven-reaching sword sect. If he chased after her and encountered the old monsters of the sect, the consequences would be unimaginable. Let's go. Lin Sun put away the nocturnal sword and flew in the opposite direction without hesitation. Wait for me. Xiao Qinghe also hurried to catch up with him. He also realized that the situation was serious. Kong Ling's defeat was a small matter, but the nocturnal sword that originally belonged to Yun Qingbai was taken away, which was an unpredictable and serious matter. After 10 minutes, the two appeared in Inwood City. After paying a sum of upper-grade spiritual essence, they smoothly entered the transmission formation located in the center of the city. When the transmission formation was opened, the moment before their figures disappeared, streaks of sword light cut through the sky and rushed into Inwood City. The leading figure, whose sword light was as bright as the sun, was an old monster of the King realm. Coincidentally, this scene was captured by Lin Sun and Xiao Qinghe before they left. Lin Sun didn't feel anything, but Xiao Qinghe was already in a cold sweat. If he had been a little slower just now, the consequences would be P.S. Thanks for Ouyang Xia's gift. In addition, I've been very busy this month, so I haven't mentioned it recently. Chapter 1039. On that day, the news of a mysterious young man breaking the records of the 5th floor spread like a storm throughout White Jade Capital. For a time, it caused an uproar. Who's that person? Countless cultivators were shocked and curious about the identity of the person who'd challenged the 5th floor. He actually broke 5 of Yun Qingbai's records in a single day. This is unprecedented. Yun Qingbai is like an invincible legend. Now, is his status finally going to be shaken? Even more people were shocked by this news. That's only Yun Qingbai's record from 10 years ago. Since it's a record, it's bound to be broken. Why are you so shocked? Exactly. It's only a record from 10 years ago, and it's bound to be unable to shake Yun Qingbai's status. There were also cultivators that disapproved of this. On the other hand, the Heavenly Sword sect was in a state of chaos and uproar. Some felt resentful, some felt anxious, and some were unable to accept it and shouted about capturing and killing Lin Sun. Of course, they still didn't know who Lin Sun was. This was the most embarrassing part. Not only had a young man of unknown origins broken 5 of Yun Qingbai's records, even they, the overlords of White Jade Capital, were unable to figure out his identity. If news of this were to spread, they would definitely become a laughing stock. Kong Ling's expression was icy cold while a wisp of depression lingered between her brows. At this moment, as she walked on the bustling streets, there was indescribable hatred and humiliation in her heart. Just today, Yun Qingbei had just given the nocturnal sword to her. But on that very day, the sword had been taken away, and this almost drove Kong Ling mad. As a top figure that was ranked 3rd in the 13 swords of Heavenly Sword sect, Kong Ling had sufficient qualifications to be proud. She possessed peerless grace and extraordinary combat strength, and she was from the mysterious 5-colored peacock lineage of the ancient clan. No matter what, she could be said to be outstanding in all aspects. But today, she'd encountered the most embarrassing and darkest day of her life. Don't let me find out who you are. Kong Ling's clear eyes surged with surging flames of rage, and she gritted her teeth with hatred. Who else could it be? It's naturally demon god Lin. A voice sounded out from afar, and it caused Kong Ling, who'd fallen into rage and self-blame, to suddenly sober up and look over. Unknowingly, he'd actually arrived nearby the Dao Development Pavilion once more. However, this place wasn't desolate like it was in the past, and the figures of numerous cultivators had gathered here. The one who spoke just now was a black-robed man with a cold expression, sunken eyes, and a bloodthirsty aura. Which demon god Lin? Someone asked. Of course it's that guy who deserves to be hacked into pieces. Not long ago, he turned the ancient Azure continent upside down and shook the heavens' pivot holy ground. He flew into a rage. Don't tell me you guys don't know? The black-robed man said coldly. How can you be sure that he is the one who broke Yun Qingbai's record? Many people still didn't believe it. The black-robed man sneered. Even if he turns into ashes, I'll still recognize him. As for whether you believe me or not, I can't be bothered to care. With that, he strode out of the crowd. But before he could get far, he was stopped by Kong Ling. Miss, what are you doing? The black-robed man's pupils shrank and his face revealed deep fear. Are you sure this was done by Fiend Celestial Lin? Kong Ling had accumulated a bellyful of rage since a long time ago. Now that she'd obtained some information by chance, she would naturally not miss it. I'm sure. The black-robed man nodded. Although the woman in front of him was as beautiful as a fairy, her aura was extremely sharp and frightening. Being stared at by her clear eyes, the black-robed man felt a piercing pain in his soul, as though it was being cut by a knife. Really? Kong Ling asked. Although she looked calm, there was an oppressive power in her voice. The black-robed man shivered and his mind was on the verge of collapsing. To be honest, I'm from the Black Sea Tengu clan. My name is Go Shuxing. I have an irreconcilable feud with Fiend Celestial Lin. The black-robed man clenched his teeth. Knowing that he appeared in the East Victory World, I immediately headed to the ancient Azure continent and activated the clan's power to conduct a comprehensive investigation. Finally, I'm completely sure that this person is Fiend Celestial Lin. Before he could finish, Kong Ling interrupted him. Cut the crap. I'm just asking you, are you sure that the person who broke the record on the 5th floor today is Fiend Celestial Lin? Go Shuxing's face froze, and then he said, Miss, in the entire ancient desolation region, if our Black Sea Tengu clan claims to be the second best in the art of tracking, then no one dares to claim to be the first. I dare guarantee with my head that the person who broke the record on the 5th floor this time is definitely Lin Sun, Fiend Celestial Lin. I've already probed the surroundings of the Dao Development Tower, and I've locked onto the scent he left behind. I'm absolutely not wrong. Her words were firm and seemed to be filled with confidence. Lin Sun. Fiend Celestial Lin. So it's actually this ferocious figure from the West Shore region. Kong Ling's expression flickered indeterminately, and she wished for nothing more than to send this news back to the sect right now. When Go Shuxing saw this, he seized the opportunity to say, Miss, when we were in the West Hung world, he almost caused me to suffer a calamity and die. I can see that you also hate this person to the extreme. How about we work together to deal with him? It looks to me like you're extremely audacious and delusional. A wisp of undisguised detest suffused Kong Ling's eyes. She was an heir of the Heavenly Sword sect and a direct line descendant of the Five-Colored Peacock. She had a proud and noble disposition, so how could she work together with the Black Sea Tengu clan that was notorious in the entire ancient desolation region? Therefore, her words weren't polite at all. Go Shuxing was furious, but he could only endure it in his heart. With his identity, he really wasn't qualified to behave atrociously in the White Jade capital. I'll remember you. If you dare to deceive me, I'll definitely cut off your head. Kong Ling floated away after she finished speaking. Damn it, sooner or later, I'll definitely suppress you, you stinking bitch, Go Shuxing swore in his heart. At dusk on the same day, the news about Lin Sun breaking the record on the 5th floor started to spread throughout the White Jade capital. Fiend Celestial Lin. On this night, this name was destined to be known by countless cultivators in the White Jade capital. Dao Martial Peak of the Heavenly Sword Sect. In the Cloud Light Hall. How could he be so strong? How could he? Zhao Jingzhen was in a daze. He seemed to have suffered a heavy blow, and the pride and contempt he had before was nowhere to be seen. At this moment, he had completely understood all the news about Lin Sun after he entered the ancient Desolation region. It included all the deeds Lin Sun had done in the West Shore region, and what Lin Sun had done in the ancient Song province not long ago. All of this, like a heavy hammer, completely shattered Zhao Jingzhen's inner pride and reliance, making him almost collapse. It had only been a few years since they last met. How could that country boy have risen to such a level? So, if you want to take revenge, you have to think about it in the long run. You can't have any contempt or neglect in your heart. Beside him, Meng Rong's expression was calm as she guided him. You must remember that your only advantage right now is that your grandfather and I will support you. But this is far from enough. The key is that you need to grow up quickly. Zhao Jingzhen said hesitantly, but he has already set foot on the absolute peak, and his combat capability is unparalleled in the reincarnation development realm. This is not an excuse. Meng Rong said firmly. Meng Rong, don't criticize Jingzhen anymore. Now, come to me quickly. Suddenly, a deep voice sounded. Father. Meng Rong was shocked. The 3rd floor of the Cloud Light Hall was an independent place for meditation. At this moment, there was a tall old man with silver hair sitting cross-legged on a futon. His whole body was surging with the unique terrifying aura of a King Realm practitioner. The old man was Meng Qiujing, Meng Rong's father. At the same time, he had another identity. He was a powerful inner elder of the Heavenly Sword sect. Father, what can I do for you? Meng Rong came and bowed. Have you heard about the breaking of the 5th floor's record today? Meng Qiujing said indifferently. Yes. Then do you know who did it? Who? Meng Rong was startled and puzzled. Her father had been busy in seclusion to prepare for the 3rd tribulation of longevity. Why would he suddenly care about this? Lin Sun. When Meng Qiujing said this name, Meng Rong was completely stunned, as if she had been struck by lightning. After a while, she said involuntarily, How could it be him? Meng Qiujing said indifferently, Why can't it be him? This news has been confirmed. It can't be wrong. I didn't ask you to come here to see you lose your composure. Meng Rong's heart shook, and she hurriedly took a deep breath to suppress the shock in her heart. She said, Father, please tell me. This kid had his quintessence spirit vein dug out all those years ago. Even if he could survive, he was bound to be a cripple. But now, he has such dazzling achievements at such a young age. According to my judgment, he should have regenerated his quintessence spirit vein. If it wasn't for that, it would be impossible for him to undergo such an unbelievable transformation. Meng Qiujing's expression was solemn, and her eyes were steaming with divine light. In the entire sect, only I, Elder Gu Dongting, and a few others know what Yun Qi Bai did when he descended to the mortal world all those years ago. It was also this incident that allowed Yun Qi Bai to obtain a great fortune. Thus, he perfected his path and stepped foot onto the peak in one go. He comprehended an extraordinary great Tao. Otherwise, Yun Qi Bai would have to delay obtaining the title of the strongest person below the King Realm for many years. Meng Rong's heart was rather restless. All those years ago, it was she who'd secretly told her father, Meng Qiujing, that an infant that possessed a quintessence spirit vein had been born in the Linsher clan. After that, her father, Meng Qiujing, told Yun Qinbai about this, and only then did the bloody incident that occurred in the Lyncher clan occur. This was an extremely private matter, and only a few people in the entire Heavenly Sword sect knew about it. Once it was exposed, it would definitely cause an unpredictable storm. At that time, it wouldn't just be Yun Qinbai that would be implicated, and it was bound to affect her and her father as well. Thus, if it wasn't necessary, Meng Rong would absolutely not be willing to mention this matter. However, she'd never expected that her father would mention this matter again at this moment. Right at this moment, Meng Qiujing, who sat cross-legged on the ground, suddenly stood up. Her mighty figure seemed boundlessly tall, and it cast a long shadow over the empty hall. The reason I'm saying all of this is because I want to tell you that this kid has appeared in the ancient Desolation region, and he's bound to come for revenge. Her indifferent and heavy voice reverberated through the air and struck directly at the heart. Chapter 1040. Revenge. Meng Rong trembled all over. She had learned about what Lin Sun had done since he entered the ancient Desolation realm. She knew how terrible the baby, who should have been dead at that time, had become. He was regarded as Demon Lin, who stirred up the entire West Hung realm. When he entered the Dongxing realm, he made a mess in the ancient Song province and killed many successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. Even an old monster of the King realm was killed by him. And it was rumored that he had a powerful holy treasure, which was powerful enough to make the immortal hall of the Pure Land of Longevity and the burning sun golden spear of the Heavens Pivot Holy Land helpless. If such a young man with a strong foundation and a holy treasure came for revenge, he would definitely be a hidden danger that could not be ignored. It was enough to make anyone feel uneasy. He must die. Meng Rong screamed and lost control of her emotions. The more she thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. The sharp voice echoed in the empty hall. Meng Qiujing didn't blame her, but nodded. "You're right. He must die." "Father, do you have a plan?" Meng Rong suddenly realized that Meng Qiujing was far calmer and calmer than she thought. Meng Qiujing said, "In the whole heaven-reaching sword sect, including you, no more than 5 people know that he is still alive. Even Yun Qinbai probably didn't expect that the baby from back then would miraculously survive." Meng Rong couldn't help interrupting. "Yun Qinbai doesn't know. He has been in closed-door training since 10 years ago. How could he know?" Meng Qiujing said indifferently, "When he sees that good fortune, he didn't even know the name of the baby. Now, haha, I doubt that he can recognize Lin Sun if he stands in front of him." Meng Rong's eyes flickered. "Should we inform him immediately? If he can take action, it will be absolutely easy to kill him." "No." Meng Qiujing refused flatly and said with a secretive look, "Rong, you can't tell Yun Qinbai about this, and you can't mention it to anyone." "Why?" Meng Rong was stunned. "For a great fortune." A wisp of shocking divine radiance suddenly shot out from Meng Qiujing's eyes, and it burned like a pair of suns were burning within her eyes. Everybody knows that Yun Qinbai is a talented cultivator with extraordinary aptitude. He can be said to be a once-in-10,000 years Heaven's favorite cultivator. Speaking of this, Meng Qiujing changed the topic with a touch of coldness. But if he didn't seize that quintessence spirit vein all those years ago, then it would definitely be impossible for him to step onto the path towards the peak of the Tao that countless geniuses dream of so quickly. Meng Rong said with a faint smile, "Meng Qiujing has been among the top experts in reincarnation development. Yun Ming stage." Meng Qiujing smiled lightly and said, "Rong Jingzhen has already ascended into the top ranks of the reincarnation evolution stage, but he's still a trace away from stepping foot onto the path to the absolute peak. Do you think that if you have the chance to help him defy the heavens and change his fate so that he can possess absolute strength in one go before the arrival of this great era, would you be willing to give it a try?" "I." Meng Rong's heart beat violently and her mouth was dry. She didn't expect that her father, like Yun Qinbai, had his eyes on Lin Sun's good fortune. Don't be so nervous. He hasn't stepped into the king realm. Although he has a fierce reputation, he is not strong enough to make me fear him." Meng Qiujing's eyes were deep and cold. "And I can tell you that if we don't fight for it, Gu Dongting will." "Is it Gu Dongting, the inner elder?" "Yes, this old guy came to the mortal world a few years ago and saw Lin Sun's extraordinariness with his own eyes. He is a king who has stepped into the second tribulation of immortality. Why does he want to get his hands on this fortune? He is prepared for Qingzhe." When she spoke up to hear, Meng Qiujing's voice carried a wisp of ridicule. This old fellow once agreed to help Qingzhe seize such fortune, and in exchange, the Green Crane clan that Qingzhe belongs to would open up the hallowed grounds of their clan and allow Gu Dongting to overcome the longevity tribulation. To put it simply, it's just a deal. Otherwise, how could Gu Dongting have passed 2 longevity tribulations in just a few years? Meng Rong realized that Gu Dongting and Qingzhe were also eyeing Lin Sun. "If we really do this, won't we have to compete with Gu Dongting?" Meng Rong frowned. Meng Qiujing said calmly, "No, we will cooperate before we kill Lin Sun and seize his fortune. As for who will be able to seize this fortune after killing this kid, the initiative will be left to the 2 juniors, Jingzhen and Qingzhe." "How?" "Solve it in the simplest way. Fight." Meng Rong's eyes narrowed, and she said anxiously, "Qingzhe has become a true disciple of the sect a few years ago, and he has extraordinary talent. As far as I know, he now possesses the combat strength to be ranked in the ranks of the 13 swords. How can Jingzhen fight against him?" Meng Qiujing's face darkened, and she said with displeasure, "Rong, if he can't even defeat Qingzhe, how can he compete for the Great Way in the Great World? What qualifications does he have to compete for hegemony with all the geniuses in the world? As my, Meng Qiujing's, grandson, if Zhao Jingzhen can't even pass this hurdle, I think he can forget about taking revenge in this lifetime." His words were filled with anger at his lack of ambition. Meng Rong's expression changed. After a long time, she took a deep breath and gritted her teeth. "Father, let's do this. I will do everything possible to improve Jingzhen's combat strength as soon as possible." Clang! Meng Qiujing waved his sleeve, and a sword-shaped jade pendant swept out, making a whistling sound like a sword. "This is the token of the sword wedding tower. When Jingzhen is ready, send him into it to practice. With his innate bone and talent, as long as he persists to the 19th floor, he can compete with Qingzhe." The sword wedding tower. It was a holy place for cultivation created by the sky-reaching sword master in ancient times. Generally speaking, only true disciples who made great contributions to the sect were qualified to enter it to practice. Obviously, in order to make Zhao Jingzhen transform as soon as possible, Meng Qiujing also made great efforts. Meng Rong held the sword-shaped token tightly in her palm, and said, "Father, how are you going to deal with Lin Sun?" The 4-star ranking competition, which is held once every 30 years, will begin in a year. If he wants to fight against Yun Qinbai in the Battle of the World, he will definitely participate in this competition. According to my analysis, compared with Yun Qinbai, what he lacks is time. Only in the star ranking competition will he have a chance to make up for this shortcoming. And this is also the best opportunity for us to deal with him. Meng Qiujing seemed to have a well-thought-out plan. Obviously, she had already thought it through. A year later? Meng Rong said, "Isn't it too late? You can't accomplish great things in a hurry. Even if we deal with this lad now, it's no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. Once we can't kill him with a single strike, we're bound to alert him. Meng Qiujing said casually, "Don't forget that this lad was able to escape under the heavy siege of the Divine Pivot Holy Land. This isn't something that just anyone can do. Therefore, if we want to deal with him, we must annihilate him with a single strike with the force of a thunderbolt." As he finished speaking, His voice had uncontrollably overflowed with a wisp of killing intent, causing the entire hall to fall into an atmosphere of great terror. This was the power of the King realm. With a single thought, the world changed. When Meng Rong saw that her father had obviously made all kinds of preparations, she immediately felt relieved and didn't hesitate any longer. She even couldn't help but look forward to it. If Jing Zhen could possess the magical and terrifying spiritual vein like Yun Qinbai, then why would he worry about being unable to stand at the peak of the King realm in the future? Dragon Tiger State. Rainlight City. Under the veil of night, the city was brightly lit and flourishing like a dragon. Lin Sun and Xiao Qinghe walked side by side on the bustling street. The former had a calm expression. The latter had a lingering fear in his heart. Motherfucker! They actually sent a king of the sword doctrine to attack us. This heaven-reaching sword sect is simply crazy. Didn't they just seize Yun Qingbai's sword? Why did they mobilize such a large force? Xiao Qinghe was slightly indignant. When he spoke up to hear, he seemed to have thought of something, and a strange smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. He said, "Brother, you wouldn't have thought of capturing the beautiful little peacock, Kong Ling, alive, right?" "I did have this thought," Lin Sun said casually. Xiao Qinghe's expression was mysterious and carried an ambiguous expression as he said with a smile, "Truthfully speaking, that little girl is indeed an outstanding beauty, drop-dead gorgeous. If you're able to subdue her, you'll absolutely be able to make all the heroes in the world envious." Lin Sun rolled his eyes. "How can your mind be so dirty? I just feel that I lack a mount." You still want to ride her?" Xiao Qinghe gasped with a hiss, and he had an expression of adoration as he said, "If the people of the world were to see that the exceedingly proud Kong Ling was actually ridden beneath you, it would surely cause the eyes of countless men to go mad with envy." Lin Sun's face darkened. This guy looked dignified, but his mind was really wretched. "By the way, we have left White Jade Jing and come to Dragon Tiger State. Brother, shouldn't you fulfill your promise?" Xiao Qinghe changed the topic and stared at Lin Sun with burning eyes. "Come with me." After thinking for a while, Lin Sun left Rainlight City with Xiao Qinghe. After half an hour, Lin Sun and Xiao Qinghe floated to a mountain range with rolling hills. The night was as dark as ink. Xiao Qinghe looked around and joked, "It's a dark and windy night, and it's a murderous night. Are you going to kill me to cover up your identity? The feng shui here is excellent. It's not bad to bury you alive here." Lin Sun glanced at him. Xiao Qinghe was surprised and said, "This joke is not funny at all." "Then don't talk nonsense." Lin Sun didn't expect that Xiao Qinghe was a chatterbox. He talked incessantly all the way, which made Lin Sun a little unbearable. "Okay, I promise you, but—" Seeing that Xiao Qinghe was going to talk at length again, Lin Sun glared at him. "Shut up." Then, he waved his sleeves. Two figures fell to the ground with two thumps. Chapter 1042. Two figures fell to the ground, groaned in pain, and woke up from a coma. "Demon Lin, how dare you suppress us until now? Damn it." These two people were Xue Qianhen and Zhang Zheng, the core disciples of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, who were captured by Lin Sun in ancient Songzhou. When they saw Lin Sun in front of them, their faces changed abruptly, and they swore loudly with eyes full of hatred. Xiao Qinghe was stunned. Demon Lin? It turned out to be him? His heart trembled, and he finally realized who the guy he regarded as a pervert was. As the top figure of the young generation in Dongxing Boundary, it was impossible for Xiao Qinghe not to have heard of Lin Sun from Shiheng Boundary. But Xiao Qinghe still didn't expect that the seemingly handsome and outstanding young man in front of him would be related to the title Demon Lin. "Lin Sun, if you want to kill or torture us, just do it. But if you want to humiliate us in this way, don't even think about it." Zhang Zheng gnashed his teeth and said with a livid face, "Anyone who had been suppressed for more than a month would have a bellyful of anger." Although Xue Qianhen didn't speak much, her face was also gloomy. The core disciples of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land were now prisoners, which was extremely unpleasant. However, both Zhang Zheng and Xue Qianhen subconsciously believed that Lin Sun didn't dare to kill them. The reason was very simple. Once they were killed, Lin Sun was doomed to be chased by the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land for the rest of his life. As long as one was smart, he would know what to choose. Otherwise, how could Lin Sun suppress them until now and not dare to kill them? You too, I understand your thoughts. It's nothing more than thinking that I dare not offend you too much with the support of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. Lin Sun looked indifferent and calm, looking down at the two. Unfortunately, you guessed wrong. I didn't kill you before because you are still useful. After all, if the big shots of your sect catch up with me, you can also be used as hostages to play some value. Pausing for a moment, he continued, but it's very obvious that all of you don't even have that little bit of value now. I've already waited for over a month, yet I still haven't seen any great figures of your sect catch up to you. What's the use of keeping you alive? His casual voice drifted through the night, but it was like a cold current that caused Xue Qianhen and Zhang Zheng to stiffen and their expressions to change drastically. You don't tell me you want to. Zhang Zheng's face turned deathly pale. Do you know the consequences of doing this? Xue Qianhen suppressed the throbbing in her heart and squeezed her voice out. I've heard such threatening words many times since I was in the Western Hung world. Do all of you think that if I'm a timid person, would I still be addressed as the Devil God by the people of the world? Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep and cold, without any emotion. Remember, it was the Heaven's Pivot sacred ground that tried to harm me first. In order to hunt me down, you sealed off the entire ancient Azure province. If I had fallen into your hands, what would have happened to me? Zhang Zheng and Xue Qianhen were horrified. The more casual and calm Lin Sun's voice was, the more uneasy and fearful they felt. No one was not afraid of death. Even a saint couldn't remain indifferent in the face of death. Moreover, they were not saints. They were still young and had a bright future ahead of them. They still yearned to rise in the great era that was about to come. How could they be willing to die like this? Lin Sun, if you let us go, I swear I'll plead with the sect to let go of all the past grievances. I won't make things difficult for you anymore. Zhang Zheng shouted. He was completely terrified. Xue Qianhen also nodded. That's right. If you kill us, it will only cause more trouble. Instead of that, it's better to let us go. We can also help you solve the trouble. Lin Sun smiled playfully and nodded. In that case, I'll take a step back and spare your lives. Zhang Zheng and Xue Qianhen were relieved. But Lin Sun's next words made them completely dumbfounded, as if they were struck by lightning. You can be spared from death, but you can't escape punishment. I can spare your lives, but you have to pay a price. Before his indifferent voice died away, Lin Sun had already started. Bang! Bang! With two muffled sounds, the sea of Qi and Dantian of the two were smashed before they could react. The wheel of great Wei in their bodies also collapsed, and their cultivation was completely destroyed. Damn you, Lin Sun! You! Good! Ruthless! At this moment, Xue Qianhen and Zhang Zheng both felt like going crazy. Being destroyed was more painful than being killed. Without cultivation, one would lose his identity, status, and power and become a useless person. This kind of blow was enough to make any practitioner collapse. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was better to die than to live. Even Xiao Qinghe, who saw this scene, was shocked in his heart. He didn't expect that Lin Sun, who seemed to be easygoing in the past, would be so cruel and cold. To be honest, he was also shocked by this scene. Just now you said you would go back to the sect to plead for mercy and solve the grievances between us. Now I've promised to let you go, but you're acting like this. It's really disappointing. Lin Sun sighed and waved his sleeve. An invisible force spread out. Get out of here. I hope you can walk out of this mountain full of fierce beasts. Boom. Xue Qianhen and Zhang Zheng were sent to the depths of the mountain in an instant like fallen leaves swept by a hurricane. There was a moment of silence. Xiao Qinghe wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Lin Sun said, "Say it later." As he waved his sleeve, another 2 figures rolled out. "There are more." Xiao Qinghe's eyes widened. Lin Sun ignored him and looked at the 2 figures. They were Jade Baby and Ling Hongjin. The 2 also woke up at this moment. When they saw Lin Sun in front of them, they both understood their situation. But compared with Xue Qianhen and Zhang Zheng, they were much calmer. Although they looked at Lin Sun with deep fear and hatred, they didn't scold him. You won't be cruel to these 2 women, will you?" Xiao Qinghe couldn't help saying. As soon as these words came out, Jade Baby and Ling Hongjin's expressions changed. What did he mean by also? Had Xue Qianhen and Zhang Zheng been killed? In the oppressive and silent atmosphere, Lin Sun said, "Destroying those 2 guys is to establish our prestige. As for these 2 girls," Jade Baby and Ling Hongjin's hearts tightened. After a moment of silence, Lin Sun turned around and left. "Let's go." "Go?" Xiao Qinghe was stunned. So were Jade Baby and Ling Hongjin. But Lin Sun had gone far and never looked back, as if he had completely forgotten this matter. Xiao Qinghe suddenly chuckled. "I knew it. How could the dignified devil god Lin possibly be so ruthless to a woman?" Then he said to the 2 women, "No matter what hatred you have with him, at least he let you go this time. Please behave yourself." After that, he hurriedly chased in the direction where Lin Sun left. Jade Baby and Ling Hongjin's expressions were complicated. They both felt extremely surprised, but at the same time, they felt lucky to have escaped from death. "I didn't expect that a demon like him would be soft-hearted," Jade Baby said faintly. Her facial features were delicate and charming. She was a delicate beauty. Soft-hearted? Ling Hongjin also looked bitter. "In ancient Songzhou, this guy set me up and made me bear the infamy of colluding with foreign enemies. This is a misunderstanding. Only a fool would believe it," Jade Baby comforted. "No." Ling Hongjin took a deep breath and said, "What do you think the sect will do if we go back safe and sound this time?" Jade Baby was stunned, and then her face changed as she realized the seriousness of the problem. They were captured by Lin Sun together with Zhang Zheng and Xue Qianhen. But in the end, Zhang Zheng and Xue Qianhen's cultivation was abolished, and only they were safe and sound. Who wouldn't suspect that there was a secret behind this? Saying that Demon Lin was compassionate and didn't kill women? Who would believe such an absurd reason? But if they couldn't explain it clearly, it was bound to cause all kinds of speculation. In fact, people might even think that the 2 of them had reached a compromise with Fiend Celestial Lin and made some sort of exchange in exchange for their safety. The human heart was the most complicated and subtle. The Heavens Pivot Holy Land had long hated Lin Sun's gut. Under such circumstances, even if they returned to the sect, it was bound to cause all kinds of interrogations and doubts, which would cause a lot of unnecessary troubles and disturbances. Could it be that the reason why he let us go was that he had already guessed that even if we returned to the sect, the situation would become not optimistic? Jade Baby was shocked. If this guy didn't have such shrewdness and means, how could he survive until now after causing so many troubles? Ling Hongjin's clear eyes were full of hatred, and she gnashed her teeth. She didn't forget the humiliating experience when Lin Sun stripped her naked. If it's really as you said, Demon Lin is too terrible. Jade Baby's eyes were blank, and she felt cold all over. Let's go. No matter what, we have to find a way to solve this matter. Ling Hongjin took a deep breath and stood up. As for revenge against Lin Sun, they had completely given up this idea. They only thought about how to explain it to the sect. I didn't expect that Demon Lin, who makes people pale at the mention of his name, would be so compassionate to women. I admire him, I really admire him. Under the dim light of night, in the vast void, Xiao Qinghe said with admiration. When I was in ancient Songzhou, I had already promised that I would settle my grievances with Ling Hongjin. Naturally, I won't make things difficult for her again. Lin Sun said indifferently. As for Jade Baby, I'm afraid that her situation after returning to the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land is not optimistic. Isn't this also a kind of punishment? Xiao Qinghe was puzzled for a while. After a while, he suddenly understood and cried, "You're too insidious?" Lin Sun said it for him with a calm look. "It doesn't matter if I'm insidious. I only kill those who deserve to be killed. I'm not a demon who kills indiscriminately for revenge." Xiao Qinghe was stunned, and the way he looked at Lin Sun was a little different. Something should be done, and something shouldn't be done. This was the legendary demon god Lin? There was an indescribable emotion in Xiao Qinghe's heart. From the initial curiosity and shock towards Lin Sun, it turned into a kind of respect and admiration. Before this, Xiao Qinghe only admired one person from the bottom of his heart, and that was Mi Hengzhen, the first blazing son of Sun Moon Palace. But now there was another Lin Sun. Chapter 1043. I say, since you already know my background, why are you still following me? Aren't you afraid of getting into trouble? Lin Sun glanced at Xiao Qinghe. Xiao Qinghe woke up from his contemplation and asked subconsciously, "What do you mean by getting into trouble?" Lin Sun advised seriously, "If you think about it, putting aside the ancient orthodoxies of the West Heng domain, just in this Dongxing domain alone, the Heaven's Pivot Holy Ground and the Heavenly Sword sect have already viewed me as their enemy. Aren't you worried about being seen as my accomplice if you follow me?" Xiao Qinghe sneered. "If you're not afraid, why should I be?" There was a touch of arrogance in his expression. As one of the 16 blazing sons of the Sun Moon Hall, he was really not afraid of any trouble. "Then you're going to follow me like this?" Lin Sun frowned. Xiao Qinghe looked very hurt and said, "Brother Lin, we've been through thick and thin together. Stop." Lin Sun said flatly, "It's fine if you want to follow me, but you should at least tell me why." Xiao Qinghe looked solemn and said, "Brother Lin, you're thinking too much. Among my peers, besides senior brother Mi Hengzhen and you, I've never admired anyone else in my life." After a pause, he deliberated and said, "As a friend, I want to invite you to the Immortal God Mountain to participate in the Junior Giants list in a month." Before Lin Sun could ask, he explained the list of junior giants to Lin Sun. In the Dongxing boundary, there would be a Junior Giants list competition every 5 years. At that time, the young geniuses at the reincarnation developing realm would gather on the Immortal God Mountain and compete. In the end, only the top 36 experts could obtain the Luck of the Great Way. Luck of the Great Way? Lin Sun was shocked. "Yes, you also know that you can't become a king without luck." Xiao Qinghe's eyes were burning. "Especially if you want to set foot on the peak of the king realm after the arrival of the Great Era, it's not enough to rely on your own strength. You must fight for and accumulate your own luck. The stronger your luck, the greater your chance of becoming a king." This was the consensus of all the ancient orthodoxies in the world. That Immortal God Mountain is a secret realm that can be said to be mystical since ancient times. Until now, no one has been able to discover its origins. According to ancient legend, this mountain was born along with the karmic luck of the heavens and the earth, and it possesses the characteristic of being eternal. It can exist for eternity, and it's undying. It's also rumored that this mountain is one of the most primitive places of origin of the Great Way in the ancient Desolation realm. There used to be innate deities born in chaos living on it. Xiao Qinghe sighed with emotion. All in all, there are too many rumors related to this undying divine mountain. But countless years have passed, and up until now, no one has been able to give a conclusive answer. "Where is Immortal God Mountain?" Lin Sun asked. "Even Brother Lin is moved?" Xiao Qinghe's eyes lit up. "In my opinion, based on the combat strength you possess, you'll absolutely be able to fight your way into the top 36 in the competition of the Minor Tycoon rankings." I'm asking you where this mountain is. Lin Sun felt helpless. Undying Forbidden Land. Xiao Qinghe answered without hesitation. If you want to participate, I can lead the way for you. He continued, the Undying Forbidden Ground is one of the 5 great forbidden grounds of the East Victory domain. Only the ancient orthodoxies possess the pathfinding mystic map to enter. Even if other cultivators have heaven-defying battle prowess, if they want to enter, they have to seek help from an ancient orthodoxy. So that was it. Lin Sun finally understood. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This was the reality. In the ancient Desolation realm, those ancient orthodoxies were like the dominators of heaven and earth, controlling all the cultivation resources. If one was not the descendant of an ancient orthodoxy, no matter how amazing his talent and combat strength was, he was not qualified to participate in the competition of the minor tycoon rankings. In the long run, the descendants of the ancient orthodoxies would only become stronger and stronger by using various cultivation resources. On the other hand, it would become more and more difficult for other cultivators to rise up. In the end, Lin Sun decided to participate in the competition of the minor tycoon rankings. Speaking of which, this competition had a lot to do with the upcoming 4-realm star list competition in a year. The competition of the two was both located in the Undying Forbidden Land. The top 36 on the minor tycoon rankings were called minor tycoons, and the top 10 of the star list competition were the real tycoons. However, the competition of the minor tycoon rankings would begin in a month. Before that, Lin Sun planned to go to the Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure. The Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure was located in the Mabai province, which was not far away from the Dragon Tiger province where Lin Sun was located, only 3 provinces away. Since he was in the Dongxing territory, Lin Sun went to see Zhao Jingxian first. Thinking of this bright and free woman, Lin Sun couldn't help but smile. They hadn't seen each other for several years since they parted outside the ultimate ruins. Lin Sun didn't know how far she had progressed on the Great Tao. One day later, Lin Sun and Xiao Qinghe came to the Mabai province with the help of the ancient transmission formation. Then they flew for half a day and finally arrived at the Wuling town. Sanqing Mountain, where the Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure was located in the vast mountains thousands of miles away from Wuling town. In a restaurant, Xiao Qinghe looked at Lin Sun, hesitated for a long time, and couldn't help but ask, Lin Sun, what are you going to do in the Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure? Didn't I say that I'm visiting an old friend? Lin Sun said casually. But why do you disguise yourself? Xiao Qinghe was puzzled. At this time, Lin Sun was dressed like a thin scholar. If Xiao Qinghe hadn't seen it with his own eyes, even he wouldn't have recognized him. If the successor of the Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure recognizes me, it may cause a lot of trouble. As soon as Lin Sun said this, Xiao Qinghe patted his forehead and cried, I knew there must be something wrong. Then, he couldn't help but ask, how much hatred do you have with the Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure? I killed one of their inherited disciples and embarrassed some of them. Oh, by the way, there's also an old guy named Gao Yang who hates me to the core. Lin Sun couldn't help thinking of the scenes that happened in the secret realm of demons, in the ultimate ruins. At that time, he was taken by Zhao Jingxian to the ultimate ruins to explore opportunities with a team of the Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure. But later, there was a bloody conflict between him and the Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure. Lin Sun still remembered that Gong Yangyu died in his hands. As for Xiao Ran, Su Xingfeng, Wen Xiang and Yun Che, they escaped. This also made them hate him to the core. Under such circumstances, Lin Sun didn't want to be too ostentatious and be seen through by the Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure. He only came to see Zhao Jingxian. But at this time, Xiao Qinghe was completely stunned after hearing this. He looked at Lin Sun with an indescribable complexity in his eyes. As soon as you entered Dongxing territory, you made a mess in the divine pivot Holy Land. They were so flustered and exasperated that they chased you all over the world. Then, you went to the White Jade capital and broke 5 of Yun Qingbai's records in a row, which made the sky-reaching sword sect furious and lose face. Now, even the holy land of spiritual treasure has enmity with you. I, Shao Qinghe, have never admired anyone in my life, but now I admire you, demon god Lin. Shao Qinghe sighed with emotion. In his opinion, Lin Sun was simply too fierce. He didn't belong to any sect or sect, and he came from the lower realms. Yet, he single-handedly stirred up a storm in the Westheng realm. Now, even after he entered the East Victory realm, he didn't remain silent. Instead, he caused great commotion one after another, as expected of an existence like a devil god. It's published. This month's Tianjiao list has been published by the Wind Whisperer clan on the Golden Message Tree. Suddenly, there was an excited shout in the restaurant. Then, the restaurant, which had been full of guests, quickly rushed out and rushed to the Golden Message Tree in the center of the city. Lin Sun was stunned. What's the Tianjiao list? It's a list made by the Wind Whisperer clan. It is published once a month, and 10 of the hottest sensational news related to the young generation of ancient Desolation territory are published at a time. Shao Qinghe said casually, "This list has been published for 3 months. Now it has become a trend with great influence and has attracted the attention of the whole world. You also know that the Great World War is coming, and the actions of the geniuses will inevitably attract the attention of the world. Therefore, as soon as the list made by the Wind Whisperer clan was released, it was sought after by countless practitioners. It can be said that the name on this list now represents a kind of popularity and fame, which will attract the attention of the whole world. Of course, there are only 10 news on the list, which means that only the most sensational and popular geniuses can be on it." Lin Sun understood and couldn't help laughing. In order to spread the news and attract the attention of the world, the Wind Whisperer clan really took great pains and resorted to all kinds of means. Shao Qinghe also laughed. In ancient times, the ancestors of the Wind Whisperer clan were known as the King of News. In order to inquire about the news, they ran faster than anyone else. It is said that they could even inquire about the color of the underpants worn by saints. Lin Sun almost spat out the wine in his mouth. He couldn't help laughing. He thought of Bai Fenglu, the old fool, who had been clamoring to be the King of News. Let's go take a look and see which of the geniuses on the Genius Honor list have done something so shocking. Shao Qinghe stood up and said with great interest. Okay. Lin Sun nodded. In the center of Wu Ling County, a vigorous and bright golden message tree stood. Its branches seemed to be made of gold, shining in the scorching sun. At this moment, the surroundings were filled with a dense expanse of cultivators, and they completely surrounded this area. Moreover, numerous cultivators were rushing over from all directions. It seemed that the release of the list had caused a sensation in the entire Wu Ling County. It could be seen how influential the list was. Lin Sun and Shao Qinghe also came. Seeing the crowd competing to watch, they couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The great world was coming, and every move of the world's geniuses also attracted the attention of countless practitioners. When Lin Sun and Shao Qinghe arrived, the news of the 6th place on the list had just appeared on the Golden Message Tree. Yi Mok, the future leader of the Origin sect, broke out of closed-door cultivation and went alone to the dangerous place of chaos, one of the 5 forbidden places. Chapter 1044. Yi Mo. A wave of gasps resounded in the surroundings. Lin Sun noticed that Shao Qinghe seemed to be slightly surprised as well, and his expression changed imperceptibly. This fellow really doesn't care about his life for the sake of a fortuitous encounter. The chaotic demon danger ground is a renowned ancient battlefield in the ancient times, and it's filled with great terror. Not to mention a reincarnation evolution realm cultivator, even a true existence in the king realm wouldn't dare step into it easily. Shao Qinghe muttered. Obviously, Yi Mo was unable to calm down after entering the chaotic demon danger ground. What fortuitous encounter? Lin Sun was curious. Xiao Qinghe explained patiently. It turned out that the chaotic demon danger ground was one of the 5 great forbidden grounds of the ancient Desolation Realm, and it was a terrifying secret battlefield that had survived from the ancient times. It was dangerous, mysterious, and ominous. But at the same time, there were numerous unknown fortuitous encounters within it. But for countless years, every single expert that entered the chaotic demon danger ground had a slim chance of survival, so this forbidden ground caused all the cultivators in the world to turn pale at the mention of it, and almost no one dared to step into it. According to the ancient books of my Sun Moon Palace, the chaotic demon danger ground is extremely complicated, and it's very likely related to the legendary battle between gods and demons. Xiao Qinghe pondered for a moment and said, "Now that Yi Mo has gone there alone, I'm afraid it's for the sake of tempering his Daluo restoration path." The Daluo restoration path was one of the 99 great ways that led to the heavens, and it was world-shaking. This great way had always been firmly controlled by the Origin sect. However, even in the Origin sect, not everyone was able to comprehend and grasp the profundity of this Tao. It was because this Tao was extremely profound. Unless one possessed extraordinary comprehension ability and extraordinary natural talent, it was utterly impossible for one to comprehend this Tao. But obviously Yi Mo was an exception. The Daluo restoration path revolves life and death, transforms the universe, and suppresses evil. It's miraculous and unfathomable, and it's not much inferior to the Tao of unmoving light of my Sun Moon sect. If Yi Mo is able to temper this Tao to the level of the profundity of the Tao, then his combat strength is bound to become extremely terrifying. Xiao Qinghe's voice carried a wisp of fear and vigilance. Presently, his combat strength is ranked 5th amongst the top 10 of Dongxing world. But if he's able to walk out of the chaotic demon danger ground alive, then his ranking is bound to change. Lin Sun listened in silence, and his heart was also touched. There would never be a lack of peerless geniuses in this world. Yi Mo, for example, was able to be ranked among the top 10 peerless geniuses, so he must be an extremely dazzling genius. At that moment, the golden message tree displayed the news of the 5th place on the prodigy list. The first Tao of the Western Heng realm, the current saintess of the Heart Sword House, Ji Xingyao, is going to challenge the first core disciple of the Supreme One Tao sect, Wang Xuanyu. Unfortunately, Wang Xuanyu is in seclusion and did not accept the challenge. Ji Xingyao defeated 8 core disciples of the Supreme Tao sect by herself and left. An uproar arose in the surroundings. Ji Xingyao, this name was destined to be known by all the great orthodoxies of the East Victory domain overnight. This proud girl is also here. Lin Sun looked a little strange. He remembered some conflicts between him and Ji Xingyao in the West Heng world. You're from the West world as well. Exactly how formidable do you think Ji Xingyao is? Xiao Qinghe couldn't help but ask. Very powerful. He should be more than a little stronger than you, Lin Sun said casually. Xiao Qinghe looked stunned and said with a wry smile, I'm just asking. You don't have to hit me like this, do you? I'm just telling the truth. This woman has cultivated the incomparably powerful 3 Lives Sword Seal. At the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, she also comprehended the Tai Xian Way, one of the 4 ultimate killing ways. Her combat power is incomparable to that of ordinary peerless geniuses. Lin Sun explained. Xiao Qinghe curled his lips and suddenly said, Compared with her, who is stronger? Lin Sun was stunned and thought, it's hard to say. In the West Heng world, I once fought with her, but there was no winner. Now, how about now? Xiao Qinghe asked. It's hard to say. Lin Sun shook his head. He was getting stronger, but his opponent must be getting stronger too. Unless there was another battle, he dared not say that he could win for sure. Obviously, Xiao Qinghe was not satisfied with this answer. But after thinking about it carefully, he also understood that the strong who reached the level of demon god Lin could no longer be measured by convention. Next, the news of the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd places on the Tianjiao Golden List appeared on the Golden Message Tree one after another. Every single piece of news would definitely cause an uproar in the surroundings. Even Lin Sun read it with relish. For example, the news of the 4th place was related to a sabresman named Laughing at the Heavens. This person came from the Beidou world and was named after the sword devil Yi Chen. Both of them were regarded as the sword and saber duo in the younger generation of the Beidou world, and their combat power was heaven-defying. The news of the 3rd place was related to Mi Hengzhen, the successor of the Sun Moon Palace. It was said that he intended to imitate the ancient sages and go to the cosmic star path, one of the 5 forbidden areas, to gain experience. When he heard this news, Xiao Qinghe was both amazed and worried. This was because Mi Hengzhen was the person he admired the most among his peers in the sect. But Xiao Qinghe was clearly aware that the universe void star path was just like the chaotic devil danger ground, and it wasn't a place that just anyone could wander about. The news of the 2nd place, however, made Lin Sun extremely surprised. It was actually related to a woman of unknown origin. According to the news, this woman lived in a mysterious and strange ice coffin with a star map, and there were 2 servants with monstrous combat power by her side. They were a giant silver-white bear and a pure-blood dragon turtle. They once appeared on the bank of the Boundary River, and the trace of the woman in the ice coffin attracted the attention of an old monster of the King realm in the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, who intended to seize the ice coffin in which she lived. But the result was chilling. The woman carried the cover of the ice coffin and killed the old monster of the King realm with a single blow. According to the speculation of the Wind Talker clan, the ice coffin should be an extremely mysterious and terrifying holy treasure. It was also because of this that the lady in the ice coffin was enveloped by a layer of incomparably mysterious luster. The woman in the ice coffin killed an old monster of the King realm with a coffin cover. Xiao Qinghe clicked his tongue. Lin Sun recalled that he had seen the giant silver-white bear at the bottom of the mysterious lake in the chaotic stars beach, and he had also seen the ice coffin carried on the back of the dragon Yuan. The experience at that time could be described as weird. Whether it was the giant silver-white bear or the dragon turtle, they were scared and fled as if they had seen a ghost when they saw him. Up to now, Lin Sun hadn't figured out the reason. But when he heard the news of the giant silver-white bear and the pure-blood dragon turtle again, he realized that there was a woman living in the ice coffin with a mysterious star map. Who was she? Was she also a mysterious existence like Xiaohao, the young master of the Nether Star Imperial clan and the young master of the sacred island of 5 elements? Lin Sun thought quickly. Right at this moment, a wave of clamorous noise that shook the heavens and the earth suddenly resounded in the surroundings, and it was an extremely magnificent sight. Xiao Qinghe patted Lin Sun on the shoulder and transmitted his voice excitedly. "Brother Lin, you're awesome. What did I say? Your heroic deeds in White Jade Capital are enough to shock the world." Lin Sun woke up from his thoughts and looked up. The news of the 1st place on the Tianjiao list had appeared, which caused a shock in the field. Chapter 1045. Demon God Lin from the West Hing realm has once again revealed his demonic bearing this month. A few days ago, he broke the record of the 5th floor of the 12 floors in one fell swoop. The record set by Yunqi by 10 years ago has been broken by a young man who is younger and more monstrous than him. Over the years, countless cultivators in the world have been asking whether Yun Qinbai, who is regarded as the strongest person below the King realm, can be surpassed. Now, the appearance of Demon God Lin has revealed the answer to us. Demon God Lin, a young man without a sect, has stirred up the West Hing realm and killed his way out of the siege of the Heavens Pivot Holy Land. Now, he has once again shone brilliantly in the White Jade Capital. Will he be able to continue on his legendary path? Let's look forward to it together. This was the news of the first place on the Tianjiao list. It was described in a long and dramatic manner by the wind talkers. The scene was in an uproar, and countless cultivators were in an uproar. Just as the news said, a young man with no one to rely on could create legends and create his own glory among the young generation of the ancient desolation realm, where tens of thousands of geniuses were rising together. It was unimaginable. Most unbelievable of all was that fiend god Lin was still able to rise so domineeringly despite the suppression of so many ancient orthodoxies. He had never dimmed or fallen silent. This was just too shocking. From now on, I will only obey demon god Lin. Many young cultivators were excited and showed admiration on their faces. Humph, the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. No matter how dazzling demon god Lin is now, he hasn't really grown up. Who knows when he will die? Some people snorted coldly and said in a sour tone, "Damn it, I like demon god Lin's way of doing things. He dares to go against so many ancient orthodoxies alone. Who in the world can compare with his boldness?" There was a continuous discussion in the field. Lin soon felt a headache. He was very clear that as soon as this news came out, whether it was the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, the Heaven-Reaching Sword Sect, or those forces that had enmity with him, they would probably regard him as a thorn in their side and want to get rid of him as soon as possible. Similarly, the bird that sticks out will be shot. Although he seemed to be in the limelight now, he was bound to attract a lot of attention. It was impossible for all of these gazes to be kind. I finally understand why the practitioners in the world love and hate the Wind Tribe so much. Lin Sun smiled bitterly. Being ranked first on the prodigy list could indeed spread his name further and make him known to the world. This was a kind of prestige. But at the same time, this process would also attract a lot of malicious attention. From now on, who in the world doesn't know you? Xiao Qinghe smiled brilliantly at the side. Lin Sun said grumpily, "Cut the crap, let's go." Alas, why are you so unhappy? If it was any other cultivator, then that cultivator would have probably gone mad with joy a long time ago if they were able to possess your current reputation. But you seem to be unwilling. Are you worried that you'll be burdened by your reputation? Xiao Qinghe grinned. Lin Sun was not in the mood to joke. He frowned and said, "I have no one to rely on, just like duckweed on the water. Once there are stormy waves, I will be swept into it. This reputation is more harmful than beneficial for me at present." After that, he stepped out of the city. It seems that this guy has not been blinded by his current achievements. Maybe this is the real talent, who regards fame and fortune as floating clouds and only focuses on his own cultivation path. Xiao Qinghe thought as he caught up with Lin Sun. Outside Wuling County, mountains rose and fell as if they were boundless. It was a scene of primitive wilderness. Mount Sanqing, where the holy land of spiritual treasure was located in the depths of the mountains. "Are you going to visit your old friend like this?" On the way, Xiao Qinghe couldn't help asking. The holy land of spiritual treasure was also an ancient orthodoxy. No matter how exquisite Lin Sun's disguise skill was, as long as he dared to show up on Mount Sanqing, he would definitely be seen through by the old monsters of the holy land of spiritual treasure. "So, I intend to ask you for a favor," Lin Sun said with a smile. "Me?" Xiao Qinghe was stunned. "Yes, it's not convenient for me to show up, so I can only ask you to go to the holy land of spiritual treasure." "But," Xiao Qinghe hesitated, "I can go, but you have to tell me who your old friend is, right?" Zhao Jingxian, the descendant of the holy land of spiritual treasure. As soon as Lin Sun said this, Xiao Qinghe's expression suddenly became weird, and he shouted, "It's her!" This time, Lin Sun was surprised. "Why, do you know her?" Xiao Qinghe's expression became more and more weird. He stared at Lin Sun and said, "Can you first tell me, what's the relationship between you and this woman?" "Friend," Lin Sun said without hesitation. "Really just a friend?" Xiao Qinghe further confirmed. Lin Sun keenly sensed that Xiao Qinghe's question seemed a little wrong. He thought for a moment and said, "Yes, a friend." There were some things that could not be explained to Xiao Qinghe. "That's good." Xiao Qinghe seemed to be relieved and said, "I know this Zhao Jingxian, but it's not because of how beautiful and dazzling she is, but because of a person." "Who?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. "Yan Zhanqiu." Xiao Qinghe said word by word. This name seemed to have a strange magic, making Xiao Qinghe's expression become solemn and dignified when he spoke. "Who's this person?" Lin Sun couldn't help but ask. "You've just arrived at Dongxing World, so it's easy to understand that you don't know Yan Zhanqiu. But to the cultivators of Dongxing World, Yan Zhanqiu is a legendary top genius." Xiao Qinghe's voice was heavy, and it seemed as if the name Yan Zhanqiu was able to bring extreme pressure to him. "He's the current holy son of numinous treasure Holy Land, and he's from the ancient divine Dao clan, the Yan clan. He's ranked third among the top 10 giants of Dongxing World. This person was born with a dragon scale Dao pattern on his back, and he innately grasped the great Dao of the 8 groups of heavenly dragons. It's only been 30 years since he started cultivating in numinous treasure Holy Land, yet he already possesses the title of invincible true dragon. I once heard an old senior of the sect say that the blood of dragons flows within Yan Zhanqiu's body, and it's extremely likely that his mother's clan is related to the bloodline of the ancient true dragons." Lin Sun couldn't help but be slightly surprised when he heard this. It seemed that Yan Zhanqiu not only had outstanding combat strength, but even his background could be said to be extremely terrifying. He was from the Yan clan, a divine Dao clan, and his mother's clan was extremely likely to be related to the bloodline of the true dragons. Even he himself had now become the current holy son of an ancient orthodoxy like numinous treasure Holy Land. Just this background and background alone could absolutely make most of the so-called top geniuses in the world dim. About 6 years ago, my senior brother Mi Hengzhen once fought with Yan Zhanqiu. No one knows the process and no one knows the result. But after this battle, my senior brother once sighed lightly and said that Yan Zhanqiu was indeed a figure like a true dragon, and he had no choice but to admire him. Xiao Qinghe's expression was complicated. That was the first time I saw my senior brother give such a high evaluation to a peer. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but wonder, this person may be called a top genius, but what's his relationship with Zhao Jingxian? Xiao Qinghe's expression suddenly became strange again. "It's very simple. 3 years ago, there was a successor of the sacred hermit land who went to numinous treasure Holy Land to propose marriage to Zhao Jingxian. But do you know what the result was?" Without waiting for Lin Sun's answer, he answered himself. At that time, Yan Zhanqiu, who was in closed-door practice, immediately broke out of the closed-door practice when he heard the news. Regardless of the obstruction of a group of bigwigs from numinous treasure Holy Land, and without asking any reason, he directly attacked and almost killed the guy who proposed marriage. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed, and he finally vaguely guessed some of the reasons. At that time, after doing this, Yan Zhanqiu said that whoever dared to have any ideas about Zhao Jingxian in the future should first get through Yan Zhanqiu. Otherwise, even if the Emperor of Heaven came, he would still beat him. When he spoke up to hear, Xiao Qinghe couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This matter caused an enormous storm all those years ago, and it caused all the cultivators that didn't know of Zhao Jingxian to remember her name from then onward. Lin Sun finally understood why Xiao Qinghe asked him about the relationship between him and Zhao Jingxian with a strange expression just now. It turned out that Zhao Jingxian had a flower guardian, Yan Zhanqiu, by her side. But what's the relationship between Yan Zhanqiu and Zhao Jingxian? Lin Sun frowned. In fact, he had a vague speculation in his heart. It's hard to say. Some people say that apart from cultivation, Yan Zhanqiu cares about and likes Zhao Jingxian the most. Others say that Yan Zhanqiu regards Zhao Jingxian as his future partner and doesn't allow others to touch her. In short, it can be roughly confirmed that the relationship between Yan Zhanqiu and Zhao Jingxian is definitely not ordinary. Otherwise, how could a peerless giant like Yan Zhanqiu care so much about Zhao Jingxian? Speaking of this, Xiao Qinghe reminded, so, I still advise you not to have any other ideas about this woman. Even if she is a friend, you should pay attention to propriety, lest you provoke a strong enemy like Yan Zhanqiu again. Lin Sun replied with an inexplicable feeling of bitterness in his heart. After several years of not seeing each other, he didn't expect that Zhao Jingxian would have a flower guardian like Yan Zhanqiu. Was this the man she had chosen? Or she and Yan Zhanqiu were already together? Lin Sun's thoughts were a little chaotic. He was actually a little hesitant about whether he should go and see Zhao Jingxian, his old friend now. If he took the liberty to appear in front of her, would it cause her some unnecessary troubles? Besides, after several years of not seeing her, had she changed? Was she no longer the person he was familiar with in the past? Involuntarily, the image of a beautiful woman disguised as a man with a bright smile and a natural and unrestrained temperament emerged in Lin Sun's mind. In his heart, he became more and more bitter and hesitant. Lin Sun, you don't really have anything to do with Zhao Jingxian, do you? Seeing Lin Sun's silence and uncertain expression, Xiao Qinghe couldn't help but be shocked and asked suspiciously. Don't talk nonsense. Lin Sun glared at him and secretly took a deep breath to restrain the strange emotions in his heart. Then, do you still want to visit this old friend this time? Xiao Qinghe asked. Yes, why not? Do I have to change my intention of visiting just because of Yan Zhanqiu? Lin Sun smiled. He suddenly realized that he had thought too much just now. Before confirming the relationship between Zhao Jingxian and Yan Zhanqiu, it seemed very meaningless to think so much, and it was no different from worrying for nothing. Moreover, he calmly thought about it. There was indeed no special relationship between him and Zhao Jingxian. At most, they could be regarded as old friends who had gone through trials and tribulations together and admired each other. As for whether this relationship could be further developed, Lin Sun didn't know either. Or it could be said that he had never considered this question in these years, so he didn't know whether he liked Zhao Jingxian more as a man and a woman or as a friend. But no matter what, this time, he must meet the other party. Ha, you're right. Xiao Qinghe slapped his thigh and laughed. I forgot that the person in front of me is Demon God Lin. What I said before was completely unnecessary. Speaking of this, he suddenly said excitedly, speaking of this, I'm actually looking forward to you taking Zhao Jingxian away from Yan Zhanqiu and taking this opportunity to strike a blow at Yan Zhanqiu's arrogance. Lin Sun was speechless for a while. This guy just wanted to see the world in chaos. Before long, the two figures appeared in a mountain range, surrounded by boundless mountains and fields. The sky was high and the clouds were light. I'll wait for your news here. Lin Sun stopped. Less than 1,000 miles away was the Sanqing Mountain, where the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure was located. Wait for my news. Xiao Qinghe agreed readily. As the successor of Sun Moon Palace, it was not a big deal for him to visit Zhao Jingxian and let her come out to catch up with Lin Sun. On the top of a rugged mountain peak, Lin Sun sat on a rock and looked at the sea of clouds in the distance, lost in thought. In his mind, he couldn't help but recall the scene from the first time he met Zhao Jingxian to the time when he met her again and again. Zhao Jingxian was very beautiful. It was a kind of clear, unrestrained, and graceful beauty. Every frown, smile, and movement of hers revealed a kind of temperament that made people feel like bathing in the spring breeze. Being with her, Lin Sun had a relaxed feeling that he could talk about anything and was unrestrained. It could be said that among the women Lin Sun knew, Lu Qinyan was peerless, Bai Lingshi was beautiful, and Lu Kaiwei was intelligent and elegant. Each of them had their own beauty, temperament, and elegance. But only Zhao Jingxian made Lin Sun feel extremely comfortable when he was in contact with her. Every woman was unique, but it was obvious that Zhao Jingxian was different from Lin Sun. As for Xia Solstice, thinking of this, Lin Sun's heart tightened inexplicably, and then he showed a wry smile, seemingly helpless and doting. I haven't seen her for several years. Everyone has their own changes, but I don't know if Miss Zhao has become different from before, Lin Sun murmured in his heart. The sea of clouds in the distance seethed and roiled without end, and under the illumination of the gradually setting sun, it was suffused with gorgeous and colorful colors. Just like Lin Sun at this moment, he looked calm on the outside, but his mind was rippling and his thoughts were fluctuating. He was not as calm as he looked. Under the perception of Lin Sun's huge spiritual awareness, there were gorgeous escape lights thousands of miles away. Lin Sun suddenly got up, his black hair fluttering, and his white clothes fluttering in the mountain wind. In the distance, the sea of clouds was steaming, and the setting sun was like fire. Chapter 1046. Swoosh, swoosh. Numerous gorgeous streaks of light flashed through the sky and gradually appeared 500 kilometers away. However, Lin Sun's face sank, and the slight anticipation and strange emotion in his heart had completely vanished. In the distant streaks of light were Xiao Qinghe and numerous cultivators from the Spirit Treasure Holy Land in apricot yellow Taoist robes, but Zhao Jingxuan's figure was nowhere to be seen. Moreover, there were more than 30 figures, and there were even a few half-step king realm existences amongst them. This was very unusual. Lin Sun had experienced slaughter and tempering himself in these years, so he noticed something was strange with a single glance. He immediately circulated the Bai and Qi and hid himself without hesitation. After a short moment, Xiao Qinghe and the cultivators from the Spirit Treasure Holy Land whistled through the sky and arrived. Everyone, there's no need to send me off. Since Miss Zhao has already gone to Immortal Mountain to prepare for the minor tycoon rankings, then I can come visit her again in the future. Xiao Qinghe stood in the sky and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist, you're too polite. The thin old man in the lead with a goatee smiled and said, Before I leave, may I ask if fellow Taoist has come alone this time? As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of the others became slightly subtle. Xiao Qinghe swept everyone with his gaze and said with a surprised expression, What? Could it be that there's a problem with me coming to visit your sect alone? The old man with a goatee laughed, No problem, but… He paused for a moment, restrained the smile on his face, and a wisp of an interrogative expression appeared in his eyes. According to what we know, fellow Taoist didn't come alone. Xiao Qinghe frowned. What do you mean by that, senior? Stop playing dumb. Who doesn't know that it was you and demonic god Lin who caused trouble in White Jade Capital a few days ago? A young man shouted loudly. We respect you as an heir of Sun Moon Hall, but don't blame us for being rude if you harbor ill intentions. Tell me, did demonic god Lin come with you? The other disciples of the Spirit Treasure Holy Land spoke successively, and the gazes they shot at Xiao Qinghe carried a wisp of coldness. In the sky, the sea of clouds roiled, and the atmosphere was murderous. Xiao Qinghe pondered for a moment, and then he suddenly laughed with ridicule. I noticed that something was off when all of you sent me off respectfully with such a large force. Now that I look at it, it really is so. He was all alone, and he was faintly surrounded by all the cultivators from the numinous treasure divine grounds. Even then, he wasn't afraid in the slightest, and he revealed an expression of disdain instead. You want to get information about demon god Lin from me? What wishful thinking. I advise you to get out of the way. With that, Xiao Qinghe stepped forward. Whoosh! The figure of the old man with a goatee flashed to block before Xiao Qinghe, and his expression had already become indifferent and cold. Fellow Taoist, if you insist on going your own way, then we can only utilize some other methods. As he spoke, the other experts surrounded him while their auras surged, and they seemed as if they would fight at the slightest disagreement. Xiaoqinghe's face sank and he said coldly, I only have one question. Do you want to start a war with my Sunmoon Hall? Gong Yangqian's eyelids twitched and he chuckled. It's not that exaggerated. We just want fellow Taoists to tell us the truth. Once we obtain the answer, we'll naturally send fellow Taoist off respectfully, and we'll absolutely not obstruct you. Clang! A dark iron spear appeared in Xiaoqinghe's palm, while his entire body was suffused with golden divine radiance, and his imposing aura instantly rose to the limit. Cut the fucking crap! Make a move if you have the balls! He shouted loudly as bolts of lightning shot out from his eyes. Alas, why must fellow Taoist be so thick-headed? It's not too late to rein in before it's too late. Gong Yangqian sighed lightly, yet his eyes were filled with an icy cold and ghastly expression. Old fellow, I'm not afraid to tell you that even if all of you kill me today, you can dream of obtaining any information from me. Feel free to try if you don't believe me. Xiaoqinghe's aura rumbled like thunder while his entire body was golden and bright. He held the spear as he stood proudly in the sea of clouds, and he seemed as if he could hold back an entire army by himself. Gong Yangqian's eyes flickered, and then he suddenly smiled lightly. Do you think that demon god Lin would stand by idly and do nothing if we make a move against you? Xiaoqinghe's expression went slightly grim as he said, What do you mean? Fellow Taoist, I'm sorry for the offense. Gong Yangqian shouted loudly as his thin figure suddenly straightened, and then he took a step in the sky before slashing his palm down at Xiaoqinghe. Bang! This palm strike was like a mountain descending from the heavens, and it seethed with violet divine radiance as it crushed and shattered space into pieces. Its might was heavy and boundlessly terrifying. Xiaoqinghe swept his spear horizontally and collided head-on with it. Amidst terrifying rumbling, Gong Yangqian's attack was easily dealt with. With just you? You think you're worthy of fighting me? Xiaoqinghe was disdainful, and the space between his brows was filled with arrogance and aloofness. A half-step king realm cultivator was indeed unable to pose much of a threat to him. What if we're included? Meanwhile, a few figures flashed out successively. There were both men and women amongst them, and all of them were half-step king realm cultivators. At the same time, the other cultivators of the numinous treasure hallowed land withdrew their respective treasures and stood on guard in the surroundings as they waited solemnly. Bullying with numbers? Are all the peak figures of the numinous treasure hallowed land dead? Xiaoqinghe ridiculed. Fellow Taoist, watch out for trouble coming from the mouth. Gong Yangqian strode forward while his lean body erupted with a might that shot into the sky, and he was like a violent bolt of lightning that smashed out. At the same time, the other half-step king realm cultivators attacked from different directions. Dong! A middle-aged woman withdrew a beast-skin war drum and lightly patted it. The sound of the drum was like the shout of a fiend god, and it shook the heavens and the earth. Swish! A short and fat man swung a bright silver chain that slashed the heavens and the earth in a fierce and overbearing manner. Slash! A gray-robed old man held a dark blue ancient sword as he charged over. In the blink of an eye, Xiaoqinghe was surrounded by enemies from all directions, and he was enveloped by various attacks. Obviously, these half-step king realm cultivators of the numinous treasure hallowed land didn't underestimate a peak figure like him in the slightest. Otherwise, it would be absolutely impossible for them to swarm him together. Xiaoqinghe's expression became solemn and gloomy, and he was furious in his heart. This is obviously bullying me because I'm all alone. However, before he could make a move, a figure had already appeared out of thin air before him. Shockingly, this person was Lin Sun. After witnessing the scenes from before, he'd long since understood the entire situation, and his heart couldn't help but surge with uncontrollable killing intent. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the attacks from all directions had enveloped him. Whip shadows, palm force, drum sounds, sword chi. All of them were powerful and terrifying, and they were the powerful killing force of the half-step king realm cultivators. When they converged together, it caused the heavens and the earth to wail and the wind and clouds to surge. The vast sea of clouds instantly shattered with a bang. Lin Sun's eyes and hands were sharp, and he instantly struck out thousands of bright green palm prints. Every palm print was condensed, real, and branded with Taoist light. Along with a deafening explosion, all the attacks were resolved. But Gong Yangqian and the others weren't shocked but delighted. Ha ha ha, demon god Lin, you finally showed yourself. Gong Yangqian looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. The other descendants of the numinous treasure hallowed land also sneered, as if they'd known this would happen. Are you an idiot? You clearly know that they want to force you to show yourself, so why do you still do this? Do you really think they dare to kill me? Xiao Qinghe was flustered and exasperated as he glared at Lin Sun. The reason why he feigned civility and conversed with Lin Sun before was to tell Lin Sun, who was hiding in the dark, that the situation had changed, so that Lin Sun could take the opportunity to leave quickly. Who would have thought that this guy would jump out like a fool? Idiot. A smile appeared on Lin Sun's lips. As a friend, being an idiot is better than being heartless. What do you think? Friend? Xiao Qinghe was stunned, and he was rarely touched. Demon God Lin, do you still remember that you killed my nephew Gong Yangyu in the ultimate? In the distance, Gong Yangqian's expression was full of hatred and horror. I've been waiting for this day for a long time, and you've finally come. You're Demon God Lin? How dare you? In the ultimate, you made my numinous treasure hallowed land lose face. Today, you still dare to set foot on my numinous treasure hallowed land. You really don't know how the word death is written. The others' expressions were also extremely cold. You really have a lot of nonsense. I dared to kill Gong Yangyu back then, so I dare to slaughter all of you today. As he spoke, Lin Sun moved. He already had the intention to kill, so he wouldn't waste any time. Bang! He took a step forward, and a snow-white ice dragon soared into the sky. His momentum changed, as if he had turned into a demon god, and he rushed forward. Gong Yangqian narrowed his eyes and suddenly operated all his cultivation. He activated a saber and slashed out. Let's attack together and kill this demon. However, before he finished speaking, Lin Sun had already rushed forward. He was too fast, as swift as teleportation, overbearing and disdainful. He punched out. With a clang, Gong Yangqian's saber let out a violent wail and fell out of his hand. At the same time, the blazing and terrifying fist momentum shrouded down and ruthlessly imprinted on Gong Yangyu's chest. Crack! Gong Yangqian's chest suddenly collapsed and burst into pieces. His lean body bent like a cooked prawn, and he flew out violently. Blood flowed from his 7 orifices, and he screamed. He was seriously injured and on the verge of death. From beginning to end, it only took the blink of an eye. The whole place was silent. One punch. Even a half-step king realm existence like Gong Yangqian couldn't resist it. It was also at this moment that they suddenly realized that the young man in front of them was a demon god who had a great reputation in Dongxing world. Even Xiao Qinghe's lips twitched imperceptibly. In terms of ferocity and abnormality, Lin Sun was undoubtedly the one that made him feel the most puzzled. There was a commotion in the field, and the expressions of the cultivators from the Holy Land of Numinous Treasure changed greatly. At this moment, Lin Sun continued to attack without holding back. After all, this was the territory of the Holy Land of Numinous Treasure, and it was only 1,000 miles away from the Sanqing Mountain where his sect was located. If he didn't end the battle quickly, it would definitely cause an unpredictable counterattack. Boom! Lin Sun's figure was like an illusion, and he rushed towards the short and fat man holding the silver chain. But halfway, there was an earth-shattering sound of a drum. The sound of a drum that seemed to be real spread out, and it was extremely powerful. Lin Sun let out a loud shout that was like the sonorous sound of the great Tao. A phantom of the divine beast Puleo soared into the sky, and with a bang it forcefully crushed the sound of the drum. The power of Peleo's roar didn't diminish, and it caused the middle-aged woman holding the drum to feel as if she was struck by lightning. Her soul was heavily injured, and she let out a shrill scream.